Good evening and welcome to our October 1st, 2025 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. Paper copies of the agenda are available for those here in person and a full packet is available on our website. Reviewing our agenda, first we'll consider our consent agenda. There's two items on our consent agenda. After our consent agenda, we'll have general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have orderly and efficient meetings, we apply certain rules regarding public comments. We'll do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Here are the rules. 1, each speaker will be limited to a total time of 3 minutes for speaking. However, we'll accept public comment of any length in writing. Individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. 3, all comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. And 4, we reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during the public comment period is not allowed. Please give your full name and address for our meeting minutes and address your comments to the Commission. Please also know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comments on the spot, but if you'll leave your contact information with county staff, we'll try and get your specific questions answered. After that, we'll move to our regular agenda. There's one item on the agenda, and tonight on our agenda is to discuss the tenant right to counsel. For each action item, we'll hear from staff or the applicant, followed by questions from the commission, and then open the item up for public comment. Once public comment is closed, we'll bring the item back to the commission for further discussion and, if applicable, a vote. Lastly, a recording of the meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. This evening, we have 3 proclamations. We're going to start with the National 4-H Week in Douglas County proclamation for October 5th through 11th. And I believe Commissioner Anderson is going to read that one.
All right. Proclamation National 4-H Week in Douglas County, October 5th through the 11th. Whereas 4-H youth across the nation are keeping it green by leading efforts to solve problems in their communities, raise awareness about environmental issues, and make a difference for their future. And whereas 4-H is one of the largest youth development organizations in Kansas and the largest in the nation with over 6 million young people. And whereas 4-H in Douglas County, Kansas claims more than 350 members and more than 100 volunteers. And whereas 4-H, as a part of the Kansas State University Research and Extension, is a program where youth learn through opportunities that provide them hands-on experience in 4-H's mission, which mandates of science, engineering, and technology, healthy living, and citizenship. And whereas 4-H has connected youth and their communities with the innovative research and resources from our nation's 106 land-grant universities and colleges for more than 100 years. Now, therefore, the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas, do hereby proclaim October 5th through the 11th, 2025, as National 4-H Week in Douglas County, and urges the people of this community to take advantage of the opportunity to become more aware of this program, of this special program that enhances our young people's interest in their futures as part of Douglas County 4-H youth development, and to join us in recognizing the unique partnership between our county and our state university system, adopted this first day of October 2025.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. I saw Marlon Bates. Does anybody would like to provide any comments on this? Thank you. Yeah. Hit the button. Did you
reload it? Okay, yeah, go ahead. You have to share your, once you open them up, you need to share your screen.
It's okay, Jake is
Jake
here.
can help you out.
Thank you guys for the opportunity for us to share about our 4-H program and for your continued support. My name is Nikki Harding, and I am the 4-H Youth Development Agent here in Douglas County. Over the past year, we've worked with other youth-serving organizations across Douglas County to provide meaningful 4-H experiences for all youth, whether they're enrolled in the traditional program or just youth out in our community. These experiences take many forms and they look very different. So one of the ways we do this is through our traditional 4-H club program, where we have 10 different community clubs across the county with over 350 youth and several volunteers. So this club experience focuses on leadership, service, and project work. Members explore their interests, set goals, and gain valuable skills through activities such as raising and showing livestock, creating art, or growing produce, and then being able to present that at the end of the year in a showcase experience. These experiences build determination, responsibility, cooperation, and of course, really important public speaking skills. We also offer project clubs, and a project club provides a year-long structured opportunity for youth to focus on a single project, something they're really passionate about, where they have found their spark, and they can develop expertise, practice leadership, and engage in community service, often again, culminating in a showcase opportunity. We also have what we call SPIN clubs, which is short for Special Interest Club. This is a really flexible program where youth can explore topics in depth again over just a few weeks or a few months. They help build skills, confidence, leadership, and teamwork, and are a great entry point for new or traditional members. This year we had over 12 different project clubs. The topics included anywhere from animal science to STEM to the arts, leadership, and civic engagement. We also do a lot of programming through the schools. So through our in-school programming, like chicken embryology or our annual Day on the Farm event held in culmination with other organizations across the county, as well as several day camps, we provide hands-on learning experiences to over 1,000 students across Douglas County. This year, we had 2 interns that led project-based activities, partnering with local organizations such as Feeding Eudora, Baldwin Parks and Rec, the Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence, and together they coordinated 24 programs, 2 day camps, and engaged approximately 1,200 youth in fostering curiosity, skill development, and youth spark. And of course, the one everybody loves, the Douglas County Fair. The Douglas County Fair is the highlight of the year for our 4-Hers, giving members a week to showcase their projects, develop confidence, and build leadership and public speaking skills. It's also an opportunity for them to connect with their peers, mentors, and community members, celebrating their hard work and accomplishments. And I definitely don't want to leave out our volunteers, because we couldn't do our program without all of our volunteers and community support. So with the support of our volunteers, our caring adults, and our community members, from our club leaders to our project mentors, to those who share career pathways with our kids or assist with school programs or help run large events such as the county fair. Their dedication and expertise shape the experience of our youth. Their time, energy, and passion for supporting youth development have a lasting impact on our community, and we are deeply grateful for every contribution that is provided. So we will remain committed to serving youth here in Douglas County for this next year. Our program year always runs October 1 to September 30. So we are just kicked off our new year today. With that, I brought with me a couple of our 4-H ambassadors, and I've asked them just to share a little bit about their project work and programs that have been important to them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Story. I am a junior in high school and a ninth year member of the 4-Leaf Clover 4-H Club in Douglas County. I am also proud to be an ambassador for 4-H in Douglas County, and through being an ambassador, I have learned and gained so much. 4-H and the ambassador program have given me countless opportunities for volunteer work and community outreach, especially within the youth in our community. Being able to work with and teach kids in Douglas County, both members and non-members of 4-H, has been a huge part of learning more about myself and who I want to become. One of my favorite things I've been able to help with as an ambassador so far has been giving a tour of the fairgrounds to the special populations of Lawrence during the week of the fair this summer. Seeing the joy on their faces and hearing their excited curiosity was a special thing for me, and I continue to work with special populations now in school, where I have been able to manage the unified sports team at Free State, which recently was awarded the title of National Unified Champion School. Another important part of my identity that has been significantly influenced through 4-H is the opportunity for leadership positions. I've been the secretary of my club for 2 years, and it has greatly improved my note-taking, public speaking, and planning skills. I have also had the privilege to work on many committees through the years, and those have helped me learn how to organize events similar to my ambassador position. With 4-H, I have been lucky to have acquired skills that are decreasingly taught to kids, such as sewing and cooking. I have loved the home sciences projects that 4-H has led me to, and this last year at the fair, I was happy to be awarded the Annette Winter Bohan Memorial Award, the overall home sciences award. This part, I sound like I really love myself, but I promise I'm not this egotistical. I also won Reserve Champion for Shopping and Style Modeling at my level, Reserve Champion for Sewing Consultation at my level, Champion for Sewing Modeling at my level, Overall Grand Champion for Sewing Modeling throughout all levels, and Place Settings Champion at my level. I promise I'm not bragging, I'm sorry. I also entered projects in foods, but unfortunately, I'm not as good a cook as I am a seamstress. All this to say, having those skills and learning what it takes to truly excel has taught me patience, problem-solving skills, and has also taught me to celebrate others' wins just as much as my own. 4-H has given me so much throughout my time as a member: confidence, class, poise, compassion, communication, hard work, responsibility, and overall, it has reminded me that the best thing I can be is myself. Thank you for your time.
Hello, everybody. My name is Laura Hartwick, and I am an 8-year member of the Meadowlark 4-H Club, and I am a Douglas County ambassador. I am serving as a 2026 CWF delegate, which is Citizenship Washington Focus. It's a program where we are able to go to Washington, D.C. and learn more about our civic rights and our civic duties. I am the vice president of my club, which is the Meadowlarks. I've also been able to serve as its parliamentarian, and both of those have taught me invaluable skills about being a leader for those younger than me and my peers. And my project work has greatly influenced me. My favorite projects, or all of my projects, are foods, photography, visual arts, woodworking, fiber arts, performing arts, leadership, and civic engagement. And my favorite project is the Performing Arts Project. It has taught me so much. I've played piano for 5 years, and I've joined my school's forensics club. Both of those were stemmed from me joining the Performing Arts Project in my 4-H club. My 4-H career has continued into the state fair, where I serve on judging teams. This year, I competed at the horticulture judging at K-State, the poultry judging, photography judging, and family consumer science judging, which was held at the state fair. And my favorite part of 4-H, or my favorite time during 4-H, is the summertime, because every year since I was 8 or 9, I've gone to 4-H camp at Rock Springs Ranch out in Junction City, which is an amazing place where I've formed so many bonds. And those are friendships that have lasted me for over 5 years, which is a significant part of my life right now. And another part of 4-H that I enjoy during the summer is both the county and state fairs. They're times for meeting new people and reconnecting with old friends that maybe you only get to see once a year. And my favorite project is performing arts and citizenship. Performing arts because I love music. I'm in my school's marching band, and I have been in it for 3 years. And citizenship because I can give back to my community and all of the communities that I'm a part of, which is my school, which is in Perry, my club, which is here in Lawrence, and my church, which is also here in Lawrence. My favorite part of those 2 projects is the junction, where I can use both of them. This past year, my club went to the Windsor Assisted Living Facility here in Lawrence, and we were able to sing Christmas carols, and I played just accompaniment for those, and I played piano solos for them. And I loved being able to see the residents' reaction and how music can connect everybody, because that is a great passion of mine. And 4-H has impacted me in so many ways. It's given me more confidence, public speaking skills that I never thought that I would have. It's taught me how to lead my peers and how to organize people and events to be effective and share the 4-H message with my community. It's taught me leadership. It's taught me how to be a compassionate and inclusive, open-minded leader for all those in my club. And the favorite effect that 4-H has left me with is the community that I've been able to build around myself in all of the aspects of my life. I found people who share my interests, which some of them are niche, and I adore the fact that I can find people who I can really connect with. And I'm so glad for the experiences and the people that 4-H have brought me. This past year, I attended conferences such as Kansas Youth Leadership Forum and Citizenship in Action, which were both very important programs for me in learning how both state legislature works and how volunteering and serving your community can work at a state level, which is something that I really enjoyed going to. And I attend those with some of my closest friends, which is a very important part of my life. And I'm so grateful for all of the experiences and all of the memories and all of the people that I've met and made and all of the things that I've learned through 4-H. Thank you.
All three of you, thank you. Appreciate it. We have your proclamation here. If you want to come get it, we've all signed it. I know. Didn't think you'd have to do that, huh? You get to keep it. Yeah. You're welcome to sign it if you want. Yes. Shake all their hands. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Oh, I miss being a teacher. All right, we'll move on to our second proclamation, which is a Domestic Violence Awareness Month proclamation. And I believe Commissioner Willie is reading that one.
In Douglas County, Kansas, in recognition of the critical work being done by domestic violence advocates and allies in service of the survivors and victims they serve, we encourage all citizens to actively engage in the scheduled activities and events sponsored by the Willow Domestic Violence Center and other organizations working toward an eradication of domestic violence. And whereas in the United States, 10 to 12 million adults experience domestic violence annually, with an average of 20 people every minute experiencing these heinous acts, and whereas in the state of Kansas, one domestic violence incident occurs every 23 minutes, and one domestic violence murder occurs every 11 days, with one domestic violence arrest made every 46 minutes. And whereas the impact of domestic violence is felt not only by individuals and families, but also by communities and a nation as a whole. And whereas Douglas County joins with others across the state of Kansas and nationwide in supporting domestic violence victims and survivors, the advocates and organizations who serve them, and holding offenders accountable in our community. Now, therefore, the Board of Douglas County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas, do hereby proclaim October 2025 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Douglas County, adopted this first day of October 2025.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. And I see Adrian's here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adrienne Nunez. I'm the Director of Communications at the Willow Domestic Violence Center. First off, thank you so much for having us and doing this proclamation for us again this year. Domestic violence is an epidemic that deeply impacts Douglas County and communities everywhere. It is rooted in power and control, and it affects people of every age, gender, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic background. None of us are untouched by the ripple effects. At the Willow, many of us are known for our 24/7 crisis hotline and our emergency shelter, but our work goes much further. We provide community and court advocacy. We have a human trafficking program, a transitional housing program, and prevention and education initiatives. Each of these programs is designed not only to meet immediate needs, but also to break the cycles of violence that can persist across generations. We are honored to serve survivors, and we are grateful to work alongside community partners who fight for stable housing, food security, and equality. We know that when basic needs go unmet, cycles of violence are harder to escape. Together, through prevention, support, and education, we are working to build safer, healthier futures for all. This October, there are many ways to learn, connect, and show support. So if you'd like to do something for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, one of the things you can do is we will be at, or the Walmart on Congressional Drive is going to be hosting a donation drive for us. So if you're out doing your shopping on Saturday, October 4th, between 12 and 4, you can pick up an urgent needs list at our information table. And while you're doing your shopping, maybe you pick up an extra shampoo or an extra lotion or many of the things that we have on our urgent needs list. And then you can drop that back off at our info table before you leave. Tuesday, October 7th, stop by our table at Claire's Community's 5th Annual Candlelight Vigil and Clothesline Project. That's going to be at South Park from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. This event honors the lives lost to relationship violence through a program of reflection, music, and community. On Wednesday, October 8th, join us at the Lawrence Public Library Auditorium from 6 to 7:30 for In Their Shoes. This is an interactive workshop that gives participants the chance to step into the lives of teens experiencing relationship violence and explore how to prevent, recognize, and respond. And then on Thursday, October 16th, don't miss our annual fundraiser, Bijou 2025, where the night glows and hope grows. Step back into the roaring 1920s for an unforgettable evening supporting survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. You can find tickets on our website at willowdvcenter.org/Bijou, and Bijou is spelled BIJOUX. Throughout the month in general, you'll find Willow staff at a lot of different events across town. We'll be sharing resources, awareness materials, and all the ways that you can get involved. We'll have a calendar with the details of where you can find us on our social media and on our website within the next few days. I encourage you to follow our social media to learn more about domestic violence and discover ways to help and stay connected to work happening in the community. On behalf of the Willow, thank you, Douglas County Commissioners, for recognizing October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you get to. All right, we'll move on to our third proclamation, which is Senior Resource Center Day in Douglas County, and Jill Joliker is going to present here. But before that, Commissioner Dorsey is ready to go.
Today is Senior Resource Center Day, whereas the Douglas County government and the Senior Resource Center for Douglas County, Inc. have worked cooperatively to support the older adults of Douglas County since the original organization was founded in October of 1972 as the Douglas County Planning Council on Services for the Aging, Inc. And whereas over the course of the subsequent 5 decades, the Senior Resource Center evolved and expanded, meeting the needs of seniors throughout Douglas County as a private, independent 501c3 charitable organization. And whereas the newly organized name of Senior Resource Center for Douglas County is reflective of the mission and goals of both Douglas County, the organization, and the larger community. And whereas Douglas County and the newly organized Friends of the Senior Resource Center have made a commitment to work in close collaboration to support older adults in Douglas County through a partnership with the Senior Resource Center for Douglas County and engineering and technology, healthy living, and citizenship. And whereas Douglas County has demonstrated its commitment to the well-being and best possible quality of life for the older adult residents through dedicated funding and organizational support of the Senior Resource Center. And whereas as of October 1st, 2025, the Douglas County, Kansas government has assumed responsibility for operations, programs, and services previously held by the Senior Resource Center for Douglas County. And now, therefore, the both parties affirm their symbiotic relationship, pledging to work together in a spirit of collaboration and trust, and fostering an environment where each organization can thrive by complementing the strengths of the other, adopted on this day of October 1st, 2025.
Thank you, Commissioner Dorsey.
Thanks,
Jill?
Commissioner Dorsey. I want to invite Megan Poindexter or the Friends of Senior Resource Center Board Chair, Diane. I think I saw Diane come in. If either one of you'd like to come up and make some comments. And while they're coming up, I do want to invite any members of the SRC staff that are here and members of the Friends of the SRC Board to just stand and let us just appreciate all the work that you've done to get us to this point today. So staff and board, if you'd please stand. Yep. A lot of, real quickly, I also want to acknowledge county staff from payroll, HR, IT. Whew. A lot of work has gone into this onboarding this week alone. And I just really want to appreciate the colleagues in our county departments and our new colleagues in the Senior Resource Center. So Megan, Diane, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Diane Adamson. I've been chair of the board of the Senior Resource Center. I've been with the board for the last 6 years. We are transitioning to the Friends of the Resource Center, which is a 401c3 nonprofit. And we're very proud that the county is so supportive of Friends of the Senior Resource Center and Senior Resource Center, and are carrying on the wonderful work that they're doing. Thank you so much.
I just want to echo what Jill said, that the county staff who've supported this transition have been phenomenal. It's required a lot of extra work on their part, and they've done it with a smile. And the technical help has been incredible. The emotional help has been incredible. And we're just so excited for today. I've really been looking forward to today for quite a long time. As I like to say, everybody is either a senior or a future senior. So this is such a wonderful way that the Douglas County government has come together to make sure that the folks of today and the folks of tomorrow are prepared for and cared for. Thank you.
Yeah. Have to shake everybody's hand. Thank you both. I know that has been a long time coming, and appreciate staff's work on that. Okay, we'll move on to our consent agenda, commissioners. Would any of you like to pull an item from our consent agenda for further discussion or questions? Seeing none, anyone in the public wish to pull an item from the consent agenda for further discussion? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, I welcome motions on the consent agenda.
Recommend approval of consent agenda items 2.1 and 2.2.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, we have motion and multiple seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to general public comment. If you'd like to provide general public comment to the commission, now's the time to come forward and do that.
Hello, my name is Nick Simpson. I'm from Douglas County. Also, I just want to make a quick public comment because I have somewhere to be soon, but I know everyone else will speak on the agenda at the proper time. But I wanted to talk about the idea of means testing tenant right to counsel and how I think that is a bad idea to tie it to the federal poverty line. So I did some math. I sent in
Okay.
a written thing. So if we're conservatively.
We'll talk about tenant right to counsel in our regular agenda. This is time for items that aren't on the agenda.
Okay, then I will not be able to comment then.
Yeah,
But I have it submitted.
yeah, we've gotten written comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. What's that? I've already read it.
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. On April 20th, 2022, I was unlawfully arrested in here by Sheriff Jay Armbrister and his deputies, Tyler Crutzel and Jimmy Wold, prior to the start of a Douglas County Commission meeting. I was charged with disorderly conduct, and that charge was later dismissed by the district attorney. In January 2024, I filed a lawsuit against Armbrister and Crutzel, this commission, and others for this arrest and other violations. And in February of 2025, the judge ruled that Armbrister and Crutzel do not have qualified immunity for the arrest because no probable cause existed that I had committed any crime. In August of 2025, both had depositions. In the depositions, some lies and omissions came out regarding the falsified probable cause affidavit and reports filed by Armbrister and Crutzel to quote unquote justify arresting me in here. And I want to go over some of those lies and omissions here. So misstatements about meeting disruption, meeting delay claim. Affidavit and report assert that Dr. Spees delayed the meeting and that commissioners had to wait until he lowered his voice to start at 5:30 p.m. The meeting minutes show the meeting started on time at 5:30 p.m. when scheduled. Noisy conduct finding. The reports repeatedly state that Dr. Spees engaged in, quote, noisy conduct, but Crutzel admitted he was not actively listening and cannot pinpoint when any alleged violation occurred. Mischaracterization of conduct, the yelling narrative. Reports claim Spees, quote, began yelling comments about his freedom of speech and began yelling at another attendee. But Crutzel admitted he only heard one phrase, which was, I don't care what you think of me, motherfucker. And he could not hear normal volume conversations even 2 to 3 feet away, undercutting the claim that this was loud, meeting disruptive yelling. The profanity equals disorderly conduct claim. Reports assert that Dr. Spees' behavior was loud and profane, causing alarm, anger, or resentment, thus constituting disorderly conduct. However, Crutzel could not identify any person who was alarmed or threatened, and Armbrister testified Spees was not disturbing the peace by sitting quietly. That's a big lie right there. A big fuck. That's a life-altering lie right there. The fighting words allegation. Affidavit claims Dr. Spees used, quote, fighting words under KSA 21-6203A3, but no evidence shows an invitation to fight or words likely to provoke imminent violence. Asked versus ordered to leave claim. Affidavit says Crutzel and Armbrister asked him to leave, implying a lawful order, but Crutzel did not testify that an order was given. The crime determination. Crutzel claimed Dr. Spees committed disorderly conduct even though he testified he did not know when the offense occurred, never made that determination himself, and denied being the charging officer. Report authorship and motivation. Crutzel admits he wrote the report and affidavit not because of his independent belief, but because Sheriff Armbrister directed him to do so. Crutzel himself never saw Spees brandish or swing the sign that he was carrying, and no one reported an actual attempt to hit anyone, only speculative could have. Failure to interview attendees. Reports omit that not all witnesses were surveyed, excluding potentially favorable accounts. Video evidence ignored. Crutzel reviewed. Man, there's so many of them, I couldn't even get through them. There's still more of them, all these lies from you motherfuckers.
And all that is accurate. Everything he just said is accurate. Thank you to the two of you who have not engaged in this, but it's less of your doing and more of the fact that the courts have shut it down in here. Your lawyer over here has learned that lesson. I think Sarah's learned her lesson about lying in here to people. For those that aren't familiar with that, Sarah decided to start lying about who was allowed to cover from the media area over here and decided to try to exclude certain media. And you see the Journal World is sitting out here in the audience where they should be instead of getting preferential treatment up here. You're welcome, Lawrence. But the fact that you guys continued to push this all the way to the fact that federal lawsuits are being filed, your sheriff's qualified immunity is gone, You have deputies turning on your sheriff because they won't cover up for his lies. You'll notice something else. Miss Willie down there sits there quietly with a damn smile on her face now when we're talking. There's a reason for that as well, because she's learned to shut up and just listen to the people when they're speaking for 3 minutes. You're welcome, Lawrence. Patrick Kelly's learned to just sit there and shut up. He can stare all he wants, but it doesn't change anything. We have 3 minutes of rights to express up here, and there's not a damn thing he can do about it. And they are no longer going to tote his water and drag people out of here because he becomes offended. Yet on October 6th, Patrick is going to go to the library and he's going to join Kelly Jones, the Chief Lockhart, Chief of Police, and Shannon. Who else is going to be there, Patrick? You're not sure, are you? But he's going to go in there and talk about how harmful these words are and how the rhetoric is just too horrible for him as a commissioner to deal with. You haven't stuck a single charge, not one. You've cost your sheriff his qualified immunity. What else is next, Patrick? Last week, the reason, to let everybody know, the reason I came up here with my hand up wasn't to try to cut in front of anybody. It was because since I didn't move quick enough to get up here last week, Patrick decided he was just going to shut down public comment. You can see that on my channel as well. The only reason I'm back here, Patrick, is because you want to play games with the narrative. You want to go into the library and do this narrative. I hope it works out well for you, because it's working out pretty good for me right now. Because you guys and your fear, your unnatural fear of people's words is making you really look like the pussies that you are. You can have your 15 seconds back.
Any other public comment?
John Eames, 66049. First, I want to say thank you to Jill and TTH for writing the community partner overview. I look at it as a system. For some numbers, 117 affordable homes from TTH, 146 affordable rentals. They say there's 500 individuals that are housed on page 22, but that's only part of the story. From the county website, 432 supportive housing units are created, 1,102 total units funded. Other housing partners are involved, and the whole set of numbers needs to be managed as a whole story, not piecemeal. For all that, we still have 639 active homeless in August, and that's up from July, 632. So I don't know where our progress to functional zero is, but it's not here yet. For the TTH's population of those 500 people, TTH lists the variety. Seniors seem to be the majority. I'd still like to know if they're driven out of their homes due to property taxes. There's domestic violence survivors, foster youth aging out, substance use disorders, physically disabled, and others. But population numbers are needed for each type. We don't know how many of each. We don't know whether they're increasing or decreasing. Also, we cannot manage that population without knowing the service resources required for each population type. Those are not provided, and they should be. Also, support services should provide data illustrating improvement paths for each of the listed population types. A successful goal is to become less dependent on the taxpayer, overcoming drug dependency, healing domestic violence injuries, etc. Simply housing is not good enough. And TTH agrees with that. On page 20 of their document, they say each of these targeted populations require not only affordable rents, but trauma-informed management. And we talked about some of that today, and coordination of the necessary support services. Well, those should be listed so we can see who needs what and what the differences are among that set of population. That's why they want to hire more supportive housing services managers to help identify those. They're where the rubber meets the road. As we heard, those people see the problems and call the service support teams. TTH also says that we are thousands of units short to meet the need on page 26, thousands of units. TTH says infill to use infill to spread affordable housing to all neighborhoods. The idea is to eliminate, quote, eliminate housing and income segregation. And we force the community to approach a community problem as a community. Okay, but before we force the community, perhaps the county can specify what are the goals for affordable housing, not simply providing shelter. What does success mean, John? Thank you.
Any other general public comment?
I just wanted to follow up on that. My name is Mike Harold. I'm a former supportive housing case manager. I did that job for 4 years before being laid off at Burt Nash. I actually attended the Housing First training with Jill, which she helped organize. And, the Housing First model, which does not work in all cases. It works in the majority of them. It's very successful in the majority of them. It is the right way to do things. And the analysis that we are thousands short of units that are affordable to the people of our community is exactly accurate. A lot of it was stated there is exactly the point, right? It's not just about getting people into housing. It's about providing them with the services they need towards that end. And that has to be coupled together. That is definitionally a part of Housing First. You have to include both. If you don't, well, folks have been out on the streets for a long time. You normalize a lot when you are in crisis. And that isn't going to go away just simply because you get in housing, especially since there are other folks who are still in crisis and you know them and you want to help them. And that doesn't necessarily help you. And it's a big balancing act, and people need support. They need services. And so making certain we define those two things together is crucial. Check. Thank you.
My name is Howard Callahan. I work at Burt Nash as the one of the two PATH program workers. Our function is to help people that are SPMI, SMI, super persistent or serious mental illness navigate barriers to services that are experiencing homelessness. I just wanted to kind of boost a little bit that conversation about resource and service gaps and the data capture concerns that go along with that. One of the things that I've noticed in the last 11 years that I've been in this field generally is a continued push towards data capture, which I think is a good thing. But I have noticed that there has been a fairly extreme poverty in considering the qualitative data of the direct reporting of frontline staff as a relevant piece of data. And I think pretty much every area of service could benefit from more attention put on that. The other thing I wanted to mention was that in every area in which there is a service or resource gap, that places every single agency and every single provider attempting to serve those clients in the position of sort of an ultimatum of, do you overfunction beyond your job and agency capacity, or do you just let this person not get help? Every single area, whether that's senior resources, prevention resources, access to counsel in the case of facing an eviction. And I would say it's probably one of the single largest contributors to difficulty in agencies in town historically being able to meet their service calls. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aaron. I don't live anywhere because the city just shut my camp down. Anyway, as you probably know, apartment managers, leasing agencies, landlords have lots of access to lawyers and legal avenues that lots of regular tenants don't. I'd like to focus particularly on a vulnerable segment of society, which is the recently unhoused who do find their way into housing. Often they're victim to predatory landlording.
Aaron?
I'd like to speak to my recent experience during the Housing First initiative.
We're going to talk about tenant right to counsel later. I think that's what you're talking about now.
Oh,
Am I
yeah.
misunderstanding you?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll come
Cool.
back to it later. So save your public comments for that.
Okay.
Okay, good. I'll make sure you get in there. Okay, thanks. Any other general public comment? Okay, we'll check online. Sarah, anyone online? No one online? All right, we'll close general public comment and we'll move on to our regular agenda item. And it's to discuss tenant right to counsel. Commissioners, you'll note in the packet that staff has provided some questions. Sarah, do you want to provide some information on these questions before we jump in?
I mean, commissioners, I can just sort of open it up and tee it up for you. We had a work session a couple weeks ago. Staff needs further direction as to, we just didn't get a lot of time to talk as a commission that day as to where do you want staff to go from there. And I've got legal counsel John Bullock here as well. Jill Joliker has been involved in this work as well. So really this is your opportunity to sort of to dialogue and then to ask staff questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Commissioners, I want to check with you. Typically, after we get a presentation from staff, we ask questions and then we open it up for public comments and then we bring it back up here for dialogue. We could have some dialogue. We could open it up for public comments, or we could, that's just the way we've done it. Would we like to have some discussion first or go straight to public comment? Or do you have questions? Maybe that's a good one.
I'm looking to fellow commissioners because I have said a lot about this topic, and I'm very eager today to hear more from my fellow commissioners. So I would, be interested to hear sort of the order of operation that other commissioners think makes sense. I think it's appropriate for us to be able to have some discussion related to the questions and thoughts posed by staff in the agenda, and for assuming that there might be some commissioners who have some follow-up questions of their own to ask staff or legal counsel who's here. I might suggest that we try that first, and knowing that there is likely to be more discussion after we've had public comment, but I'm open to other suggestions if anybody has a strong feeling.
I'm always game for questions, as you maybe know. So I'll start with one, if that's all right. It's a pretty basic question. We usually, when we're talking about a service that the commission is looking at, whether or not that's appropriate to provide at the commission level, we look at what are the outcomes we're looking for, what are the processes, and what are those cost, or are there options within there that come with different costs? What does it take to get us some of that information? Because we're not there yet.
I mean, I would look to the commission to provide staff with some direction as to how to scope a program cost. I would need to know kind of what you're thinking of and things you'd like to have included, and then staff could go away and do some research and provide that back to you. And then as commissioners know, those all come through the annual budget process. It starts in April and is concluded in August. So that's the process that we use to fund services.
Are there some regional examples that we would start drawing from to see like what some of our regional partners are providing or paying for?
Yeah, I think the staff could bring you some variations on a theme, as I like to think of it. Just some, and I put a couple of those in the memo. Kansas Legal Services is doing something through the city of Topeka in Shawnee County. We could look at what that looks like, what their scope of services is, bring it back to you, see how it compares and contrasts with what commissioners would be interested in. Kansas City, Missouri has a program, much larger, very large program, so we could look at that. You heard from Kansas Holistic Defenders when we had their the work session on, they have a grant to do some of this work. I'd like to understand a little more about what their grant covers, what's the scope of their grant agreement. Could additional scope be added without hurting or harming their grant? So I think those are the places where we would start.
And maybe, and you mentioned some of these, but are there other partners in our community or interested in coming to our community that would be interested in providing services of this type? So,
I think the only way we would know that is to really issue an RFP to know if somebody would be interested in providing that counsel. Those are the community partner agencies that we're aware of at this time.
I think I would be interested in knowing some of the similar things that you just mentioned, Commissioner Willie, around the current scope of the contract, as well as, because I remember in the last work session that we had, I remember Sam talking about, and I think it was Hetty, talking about sometimes when they take cases, they can only take so many cases. And at times they also have to freeze their caseload. And when they do that, if we were to add another layer on, how would that affect the current scope of their contract? So do they have a service agreement? Are they a community partner? Would this change the relationship that we have with them? And then if they have to freeze any of their caseload, how would that affect their ability to take on any additional clients? And then who would accept the other clients? And then from that perspective, how does that affect our budget? And then how does that affect the DA's budget, I guess? I think that would maybe, no? Or how would that affect our other partners' budget? And then from that perspective, what is the better, I guess, cost scenario? Would it be better for the team to add another lawyer? Would it be better for us to partner in a different way? So I'm kind of thinking about it from that perspective. What is going to be the better budget scenario if we actually do decide to pilot this between now and moving into the next budget cycle, as we take a look at those different scenarios?
Currently, KHD, Kansas Holistic Defenders, has a service agreement with the county for misdemeanor indigent defense. So they don't have an agreement at all with the county to do anything related to eviction. Separately, they have a grant that they got on their own and that pays for or helps to finance their service with eviction. So their current service agreement with us doesn't have anything to do with eviction. But our service agreement could be modified and changed. We generally, would have to be modified and changed if we were to ask them to do eviction. And so I just want to make sure we got two separate buckets. Generally, they do case freezes related to misdemeanor defense, not related, I don't even know on eviction. So, and they may not have requirements under eviction to do that same thing, but their caseload limits come to us under misdemeanor defense. But those are all things I'm making notes that we can look to follow up on.
So then would we have, I guess, two different agreements with them?
No, we'd have to modify the existing agreement. And,
Okay.
Obviously there's a lot of steps between that, knowing that and we're modifying the agreement. But generally we try to have one service agreement per provider and we may have multiple scopes of services inside that agreement. Burt Nash, for example, we have lots and lots of scopes inside one service agreement.
Okay, thank you.
My turn? Where do you want to go? My opinion is this large group of people is in the wrong chambers. I think this issue needs to be addressed either at the state level or at the city level. And correct me if I'm wrong, the county has very limited ability to raise taxes. It seems to me that the best way to finance counsel for people being evicted is through a tax that should be paid by the renters. It doesn't seem logical to me that landlords who pay property taxes should be paying monies to finance a lawyer who's going to be arguing against their position. So I would think either the city or the state, and I think at our work session, most examples of where this law has passed was either at the city or the state level, not at the county level. That's my opinion.
I'm still have some curiosity. So, you asked in your memo, is the commission interested in exploring tenant right to counsel as an addition to the code? What we were presented, what was brought to us from a group of community members was not an addition to the code. It was a resolution. Is that correct?
No, it was a code sample.
It was a
draft
code sample. Okay.
So how I viewed it.
So as you look through that code sample, what things came up for you from a legal perspective on, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought at one point there was a draft of that in our packet. Is it not there? Okay.
No, so that I really want to get some direction from the commission before
Okay.
I go in that route. So if I could take the first part of your question.
Sure.
So currently in our code, the county code is related to laws and rules on citizens. And in most cases, they don't apply to anyone that lives in a city. Most of our code is related to the unincorporated area. So the building code is not the city of Lawrence's building code. That is only the building code for the unincorporated area. The same with the public works roads, public works statute, that's really just county roads. It's not roads inside cities. In Kansas, counties have very little ability to tell cities what to do. We only can control things in our own role and scope. So from that perspective, the reason why I sort of separated those two questions out, because to me, I think there are two questions. One is about code and putting a right in a code and a program development, because and they are connected. If you did put it in code, my assumption is the commissioners would want to have a program to do such thing. So they are somewhat tied, but I kind of broke them up because I do think there are two separate questions from that sense. Currently, our current code doesn't really talk about the services that we, the millions of dollars Douglas County spends to provide human services in this community are not in our code. You create a budget that funds them, and then you direct staff to prepare service agreements, contracts, for lack of a better word. And then we as staff execute those contracts with those community partners in the community. All of those services are not in the code. So I do think that if you want to explore that, we can, but I'm a little worried about a cart before the horse, because if you don't fund the program, how do you, but it's somewhat of an order of operations, and I'm here to serve at your pleasure. So you all can tell me what you want to do about that. The section of code that was presented, put it in section 3, which was the building code. That only applies to the unincorporated area. I don't think that's the proper section. If the commission wanted to consider putting it in code, I wouldn't recommend putting it in that section, just to clarify that I think it's the commission's intent that this applies to the whole of the county, not just the unincorporated area, which, by the way, has very little rental housing. So I think those are some clarification points that we need to make from that perspective.
Is there anything in our current code that gives the people of Douglas County a guaranteed right that must be fulfilled by government?
No, not that no. That's not how our code is structured. Our code is more laws and rules on the community. How fast is your speed limit? How wide is your road? What is your building code adopted? How far can your, easement be back from the road? That's the primary purpose of our code.
And it does
But I would say
Yes.
there's nothing that prohibits it from having more in it. You know, you could put more in it. And as we talked about at the work session, we don't think that there's anything that would prohibit it as being that we could outline all of our services in code if you wanted to. You certainly could do that if you wanted to. I would note that every time you change and amend the code, it requires us to publish a notice in the paper. It requires, which is expensive, and it requires some extra notice of things like that. And we could get into that in more detail if that's something the commissioners are interested in. But, it's not, there's nothing that would necessarily prohibit it from being in code. And there's no liability, is what we talked about at the work session, on the county if it is placed in code. John can talk more about that if you have more questions.
I am familiar that there are functions of county government that we don't get to decide.
Yes, lots.
And they are decided by the state legislature, right?
In many cases.
And it is enacted into state law. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So in those cases, like having a Douglas County court system is our responsibility, and we are maybe the court system is a great example, but we are required to fund the sheriff's office, for example, and that's written into state law.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we wanted to have, if you follow that line of thinking, expecting that of county government could come from the state. That's one way to force this to happen, right? To have that expectation of counties. Or we could fund programs, or we could put it into code. Those are just some of our options.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah. And as we talked about last time, the difference between constitutional rights and other types of rights, I think we have agreement that no one's saying that this is if it was in the county code, it would be a constitutional right. We can't create the Constitution here in Douglas County, but it would be an indication that there was a desire upon the commission to provide this service in the community, and provide, lots and lots of access by right, if that's that notion. But I think I would like to use small r in my vernacular as opposed to capital R from that perspective, if that makes sense, in terms of what a right is. But ultimately, even if you put it in code, you still got to figure out how you want to build the program, how you fund it, who does it, how do they do it, how do we hold them accountable, what metrics do they use, and to me, as an administrator, that's the part that is going to take more time, and it's going to take. We want to get it right, and we want to have something that the commission can fully consider as a part of a budget process, which you do every year. Sometimes those programs are brought to you by community partners, and sometimes they're brought to you by staff. But so I think to me, there are more questions around what does the program design look like? How do we pay for it? Who would do that service? And that's why I want to get started on that work. So at a certain point, and we can do two things at once. We're pretty smart. And so we could work on program design pieces while the commissioners, continue to entertain, how do they feel about it being in code? And where does it belong, and what should it look like, and should we put other services in code? So I really don't want to make this an either or conversation, because I don't think it needs to be. And I actually really think the conversation about how the program design work is going to take longer and should be done first, so that you have the program in place, you voted on it, you've allocated funds, and then figure out what your code language should be that sort of matches that, if that's where you want to go. And I use a big if from that part of the conversation.
Sarah, how often do we fund things outside of our budget process?
We don't. We don't fund things outside of the budget process. I've been ongoing program support is not something we allocate outside the budget process. You did set aside $40,000 in the 2026 budget for conversations around eviction. So we have that. We have done some pilot funding for a few things, but then you really have to add the ongoing funding for that and I would be reluctant to put a pilot in code. But we've gotten grants for pilots and have done that. And then the commission's considered those things. So
So I think sometimes, sorry,
Go
can I
ahead.
follow up with that. Sometimes when people see on our agenda, we have items that have a cost, and then we're considering that we're releasing funds that had been set
Already
aside
budgeted.
in our budget, and then we're getting that program detail at that time.
correct. Yeah. So each year, and that includes, you pass a 5-year CIP with hundreds of projects in it, hundreds of roads, bridges, and culverts. We have a budget estimate at that point in time. And then once it's scoped out, and that's actually according to state law as well, it has to come back before the commission to be awarded. And so the same goes with our services. Commissioners set a budget for it. Staff goes back, prepares that service agreement, outlines that scope of work, and then we execute the agreement. So everything that you vote on your agenda, if it has not been included in the budget, I'm going to make it very, very clear to you.
Didn't I hear recently this subject was going to come up at the state legislature this year?
There are some conversations around housing advocacy and fair housing that are gaining momentum at the state level. Right to counsel and eviction procedures would be a part of that, but it's a much larger umbrella of policy directives being talked about than just specifically tenant right to counsel. Another thing, and this came up after I published the agenda, we spoke to our intergovernmental relations coordinator, Stuart Little, earlier today. I think there are some things he could provide you with some feedback on if we're going through a program development process. So that's another thing you could direct me to bring back to you, is sort of that sort of landscape from what's happening at the state level and what does our intergovernmental relations person think about what would happen at the state level regarding this. So that's certainly something I could add to my to-do list.
I think it's a legal question, but say we put into code that everybody has the right to counsel that's being evicted, and we allocate $50,000 in the budget to fund that. And so many people get evicted that the bills come in at $75,000. Well, we can only fund $50,000 of the $75,000. So somebody is not going to get their counsel paid for. Can they sue us?
Under the proposal that was presented by the advocates for this program and the program outlines that I've looked at, the answer would be no. The structure of the proposed program is to create a service that would be provided and to fund it, and that would be constrained by the amount of funding available. And so if there were people that were not eligible for the service based on the amount of funding that's available, they would be facing eviction proceedings without a lawyer, but they would have no legal recourse to us for any additional relief beyond that.
Being that A Place for Everyone is a part of the Community Health Improvement Plan, have we explored partnering with our cities to actually build this in as an ordinance or a policy, since it sounds like this is potentially out of scope for the county? So, because it sounds like that would be a good opportunity for the city of Lawrence, since we know when we heard in our work session that we have a majority of those that are experiencing possible homelessness coming from Lawrence. And then potentially we have smaller pockets coming from Baldwin, approximately like 7. Then we have Eudora. Some of the numbers I've seen are around 4. And then we have smaller pockets possibly coming from Lecompton. So it would sound like that would be a great opportunity to partner with our cities to actually develop that if it's out of scope for the county and if we're waiting on a state policy.
I want to at least say a little bit about A Place for Everyone. So A Place for Everyone was passed by both City of Lawrence and the Douglas County Commission. It was not passed with a funding model. Many objectives in that plan are not funded. and would need further development. This is very similar, as commissioners are going to use to, as a comprehensive plan on the land use side. You pass a very broad land use plan through the comp plan, and then there are lots of little plans and lots of programmatic and procedural details that come through that. So we are committed to a place for everyone, but we have not, it's not fully funded and it's not fully developed. So I did want to add that. And then I think the conversation about whether or not this is something the cities would be interested in funding and providing as a right, I think is something we could ask them more about, if that's something the commission wanted us to do.
Commissioner Anderson, I have some responses to that. First, I would disagree that it's outside the scope of the county. First of all, there is no particularly prescribed or defined scope for where this service might lie. We have heard and seen evidence of examples in municipalities, statewide, and counties. There are some counties. There are fewer counties. Many of the cities and municipalities that have passed it, they are larger cities and municipalities, and the eviction court is a function of their municipal government. That is not true here. And evictions happen in district court, and district court governs itself, it's governed by the state. We fund it, we collaborate with them to try and, effectively serve community members in Douglas County who have to navigate court cases in district court. But eviction is a district court proceeding. It's not municipal court. So in my opinion, that means it makes zero sense for the cities to be involved in establishing or providing access to a programmatic right and facilitating that. Funding and potential funding support from cities in the future, I think, is a totally appropriate conversation. And we heard a few different ways that has happened in other places during our work session. There's honestly a ton of examples of ways that this has been funded. It being funded through the general fund of the government that passes it is the number one mechanism for funding it. But it looks like different things, including additional fees on rental licensing fees, development fees for the when new deeds or titles are registered related to development. Like, there are different ways to think about, and I think ask our city partners, in particular the city of Lawrence, since we have adopted the joint A Place for Everyone strategic plan, how might a more comprehensive and sustainable funding model in the long term look. But I believe that it is appropriate that the county be considering this is a right that we can help facilitate and provide to the community of Douglas County, and that because of the reasons that I just described, and it's district court, and we want it to be available countywide. And two, because big picture wise, a huge piece of what I see are the county's role in A Place for Everyone and our collaborative efforts to strive towards ending chronic homelessness and increasing affordable housing is in permanent supportive housing, which we talked a lot about at our work session today. And it's also in the prevention space, preventing homelessness. So all of the millions of dollars that Sarah mentioned earlier that we invest into community partners for a variety of services, many of those things are directly tied to or otherwise related to prevention of homelessness. And so to me, this is squarely inside that scope. This is a very effective, very evidence-based, and proven time and time again tool at effectively preventing some homelessness. Does it prevent all homelessness? No. Is it going to stop all evictions or prevent all evictions? No. And I don't believe that that's what the intent of any tenant right to counsel program is purporting to do. It's about making sure that people have access to legal counsel to be able to understand their rights fully, and that there's an opportunity for a balancing of power in that setting, in particular with the aggressive timeline that Kansas state statute lays out, and that the ability to access a lawyer in that moment, if there's an opportunity to prevent homelessness, either by getting more time in order to gather resources for non-payment of rent, if we know that's the primary reason people are having evictions filed against them, or because they have counterclaims that we talked a lot about in our work session, or other issues to bring up that are legally valid that they would not know how to present, but for the advice of counsel. It's just so squarely in prevention, and it's not, evictions are still going to happen, but we can learn more information about those evictions and about the landscape of how they're happening. And I just think that the county is well positioned in our work with rent and utility assistance and coordinating supportive housing services and crisis intervention services, and being a primary funder for a lot of the organizations that might be working with people who are navigating this and who might access legal counsel as a right if we were to establish this program. It's very squarely inside the county's scope, in my opinion. I really hope for the state legislature to come around on a few things, quite a few things actually. But if tenant right to counsel and more and change to eviction statutes were something that the state legislature would entertain, I would love that. But I'm not interested in us waiting on that, and I don't believe that it makes sense to take this conversation back to the cities, like in a sort of back to the drawing board about it. I think that there are other ways we can potentially partner with them on sustainable funding, but they also have other prevention levers and tools in their toolboxes that are more appropriate for them. Code inspections, rental licensing program, and strengthening things around that that are squarely within their scope.
And is that because?
Hang on, Hank. So I'm going to kindly ask that we refrain from that. I understand that there are strong feelings around it, but we need to continue our discussion in an orderly way. We try not to interrupt the conversation with applause and cheering and things like that. So if you could follow that, we'd really appreciate it.
And is that because I heard you say, Sarah, that typically this is not something that the county would typically engage in, that you would leave it to the cities to develop this kind of a policy, because it's not, because you said that this is not something that the county would actually develop a code around.
Let me clarify. So
Okay.
this is code and program. This is typically, programs are typically not in our code.
Right.
We do programs like this all the time. So we do a lot of work around, we funded a self-help center to create access to the community for that. That's 100% funded by local tax dollars. Your state tax dollars do not pay for that at all. We've done programs, other programs, Housing Stabilization Collaborative that provides funding at a local level to help with homelessness prevention. So we do lots of programs in this space. They just don't live in our code. They
Correct.
live in your budget.
Right.
And you fund them. And then we develop a service agreement with a partner and that outlines a scope of work, and then it's managed. Do you see that's the distinction?
And that's why I'm saying that if we want this to be a code, right, or a policy, right, or an ordinance, and that's why I'm saying that maybe we should partner with our cities if we really want that to be a tenant right, right? Then I think that's where it would be an opportunity for us to partner with our cities if we want it to be there, if we want it to be in big R, right? Versus a little r, versus, because if it's a little r, we're only funding a program, and programs go away when you don't have funding. If it's a big R, policies stay. So that's why I'm saying that a big R is kind of better, right? If you have a right that you've actually put in as an ordinance, and you actually partner with your larger city where you have more of a challenge with individuals that are actually being evicted, and you can actually partner with those policies to actually develop a strong policy or an ordinance to actually protect the individuals that are actually losing their right to actually housing. And then partner with your other cities as well that are actually losing their right to housing in Baldwin and Eudora and Lecompton versus funding a program, a little r, that may not always be sustained because you may not always have these 5 commissioners that are super excited about funding programs, little r's. These individuals might go away, and then therefore your funding might go away. So that's all that I'm saying.
I appreciate what you're saying, Commissioner Anderson, and I mean, I think I follow where your line of thinking is. I would just offer that my perception of this sort of notion of big R right, little R right is, to me, it's more about like the kind of right we're talking about is not a constitutionally protected right. It is not the same thing as the right of every person who's charged with the crime to fill out a financial affidavit and be appointed counsel because the Constitution requires that, and that there are liabilities and consequences if that's not carried out, right? That's established in federal law, and then therefore we as a county have responsibilities to fund whatever the cost of that is, and the court has responsibilities to ensure that every indigent defendant in criminal court is aware of and afforded that right. But the right that we're talking about, because it wouldn't be creating because we don't have the mechanism to create a constitutional right, it's about creating a right to access counsel. And it's a right that has to be accessed by the person by the tenant who is eligible. And in my opinion, the best way that looks is that we don't screen out, and we're screening everybody in. If you have an eviction filed against you in Douglas County District Court, part of what you're being informed of is that the eviction was filed, the court date, and that you have a right to access legal counsel, and this is how you do it. And so those are some of the details that, you know, we need to suss out if there's enough interest in this commission to move forward with developing programming guidelines and standards. But to me, it's about accessing, you know, a person still has to access the right. I don't quite think of it in the way that you're framing it, and that it's, you know, a big R right only if it is somehow in policy. And I think there are ways, like, we can come back to the policy conversation about, you know, code, or are there other ways of us making it county policy? In my opinion, that's not necessarily going to change anything about or particularly dictate the provision of services. I'm a service provider and advocate first, so my brain is very much in like, how do we start getting the answers to many of the questions in our memo about you know, talking with service providers, getting a handle on the cost analysis, and trying to make our best guess at what we think the average amount of people facing evictions could cost if, you know, X number of them, based on what we already know from years of data about at least appearances at those dockets. And that it will give us the opportunity to start collecting more holistic data and information. And I guess I don't personally believe that city ordinances, and in this instance, we're talking about 4 different cities in our county that we would need to all have on the same page. And 3 of those cities don't have rental licensing programs. They don't have rental lists. They don't have any relationship to renters or tenants in their community. That's unique to Lawrence. Lawrence has some of that. Maybe could bolster some of that, and there are opportunities for us to, I think, really strengthen our partnerships in some of these ways by adding different tools to the toolbox. And this is a tool that I think, like, we can effectively build a program and build, you know, some type of written policy that does live with the county. And I think, you know, Sarah, maybe especially since Commissioner Kelly brought up the resolution earlier, just to like talk about what is a resolution in county government? How do we use those? What are sort of the different ways that we use those? And maybe that's a way in which we codify the right. My brain is more focused on wanting to really understand how do we get to some program specifics, and hopefully the support of enough, you know, fellow commissioners of mine to move forward on putting this into practice. And in my opinion, we can continue to simultaneously have a conversation about how does it make sense to put it in policy, where and how and in what way do we put it in policy. I think that My personal opinion is I want us to deliver the services faster than that might take us. And so I think those two tracks can happen simultaneously, the way that I see it. But, for the purposes of today, I think it's really important for staff to know if there is a majority of the commission that is interested in pursuing this programming and directing them to get more details, some of the data that we've already talked about, the cost analysis, the just all the different mechanisms and specific considerations that county administration needs to think about when building a program that that we would be launching for the community and what that looks like. That helped. That was
It
I
does,
sort
yes.
of wandered off, but
Yep. And I think I've been clear, and if I haven't been clear, I'm absolutely supportive of tenants' rights to counsel. But I think what I'm super fascinated by is where does it truly sit, right? And who should it sit with? Whether it should sit with the county as a funded program, or if we should partner with the various cities and support them in truly identifying their role and how they should also be supporting our tenants and what their funded role should also be, because it shouldn't always be the county that's always the person at the table. And so, yes, I'm going to say it. But I'm also in favor of us moving forward with a pilot or a test, whatever that actually looks like, and then also identifying how we partner with our cities to take that next step and to truly understand what it would look like either to partner with the state and or to partner with the various cities to develop an ordinance or develop various policies and to see what that journey looks like to move it forward. But to take that test, right? And then whatever those findings are that we identify, whether it be the findings from the previous grant, if those can be leveraged, and then the findings from the work that we might move forward if the commission decides to, then to take those as well, to share those with the various cities and to share them with the state, and then to see what we can do moving forward.
I don't think we have enough information to really decide much of anything. For example, how many rental properties are there in Douglas County? How many people get evicted each year? What are the causes of eviction? I think we need more data.
And some of getting that data is going to be hard to get. We can get some of it easier, like rental properties and perhaps how many evictions happen, but why they were evicted, that's a very difficult, you'd have to dig in. We don't have summary data on that. It's not reported in that manner. We'd have to do a lot more work or perhaps even hire. That would be a work of a potential contractor to do this work, is to track that for us and to provide that data to us, because we don't have it right now.
I just want to react to a couple of things I've heard commissioners say and share some of my thoughts. For one, I don't think it doesn't need to be an either or. I think it can be and. I will never say that we shouldn't partner with the city, whether that's City of Baldwin or Eudora or Perry Lecompton. I think we should always look for that. But I think if we see a value in providing access to counsel for those who are evicted, then we should move forward on that. I appreciate Commissioner Reed hearing from you that the policy thing can move down the road. I haven't figured out in my mind how to handle the request for a code change. When we did giving access to counsel for anyone with a misdemeanor, we didn't put it into code. We still did it. We continue to fund it. I do appreciate, and what you said, Commissioner Anderson, that there feels like there's some type of security around having it written in code that it will always happen. And I think what I heard Sarah say was just because it's in code doesn't mean we need to fund it. So, for example, code requires that we have certain expectations for building code. And that might mean that we need to fund a building code inspector. but it doesn't say we need to hire 7 building code inspectors. We could hire a part-time building code inspector and still have 1. I think another good example of in this arena may be rental code inspections, right? We can put the code in place, but if it's not enforced and the budget dollars aren't put behind it, what's the purpose of the code? And so I'm glad to hear you say, like, maybe we need to think more about what's the right policy. I would be very in favor of as we develop our legislative platform, pushing hard on not only ours, but working with the other 5 largest counties. When we met a few weeks ago, maybe that was a month ago now, the days roll together. I think there may have been some interest in that there. At least there's an opportunity to get more people involved. Some of the people maybe here helping others understand the pressures and the power dynamics that are at play in these spaces with renters and with landlords. So I do think we need to sort of answer some questions to see how we want to move forward, and then we should take some public comment. So maybe if I is there enough to move forward on a code amendment, commissioners? Do we feel like there's enough, or is that something we might work on after we create policy? So my first question, maybe I'm putting those two together, is I would say I'm not hearing enough, and change my mind if I'm wrong, that there's a desire to change the code at this point, maybe down the road after we've developed more programming. Am I reading the commission right on that, or am I not reading the commission right on that?
I feel like the code change only is a paper win. It doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't fund anything, and it doesn't teach us anything. So that as a first step leaves me pretty cold. It also seems a little odd since we don't do that with a lot of other things that we really hold dear. I think that's all separate to me. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying I think that feels not organic at this time when we're still talking about, is there interest on the commission? Are there funding sources? Are there partners to move forward with, specifically tenant right to counsel in evictions? So that's kind of where I am with the code thing. A lot of other things to say too, but I'll let other commissioners, since you asked that question.
I agree with you.
I'll just reiterate, I am interested in seeing this made into policy in some way. I'm not sure that it makes sense as a new code chapter adding to the code. So I think, that it's fair to say there are more questions around that. I'm interested in the possibility of what a resolution could look like. We pass resolutions all the time and have established not every program, but other programs through resolutions. It's not, it's not tied to every single thing we've ever voted on in this, in these chambers, but it is a lot. And so I think that that's an idea that I am interested in exploring more, because I do think that there is, there's validity to wanting to make it known for the public and for the community to be able to see that there is, something in established writing voted on by the commission that declares, for these reasons, we are supportive of developing this program for this purpose. And here are some, very basic sort of guardrails to it. And then the other mechanisms and procedures that are either happening alongside that or born out of it, over time, are us figuring out what does it look like to do a request for proposals and to try and determine who might be interested in providing this type of work as a contractor. What does it look like to contract for these services? How do we consider conflicts of interest, since we're talking about legal services? Like, there are some more mechanical questions, I think, to unpack about it. But I am interested in us continuing the conversation about what does it look like to make this policy for the county, and not just a program that doesn't have any other sort of assurances, or like hesitating to use the word prescriptive, but that just prescribes what some very basic tenets of it are and what the primary purposes of it are. And some of those things, are questions that are further down in here, like would it be income limited or limited in some other way or not? And would it be available to everybody who has an eviction filed against them, or are there other proceedings too? Like there are some more of those questions that I think make sense to unpack in the context of developing some type of policy. I don't know if it's a county code versus a resolution. I think there's more to talk about that, but I do want to continue that conversation and not let it die.
Agreed. And I'm also interested in a policy, as I stated earlier. And so I'm, absolutely interested in having those conversations and moving them forward. And if we're having any conversations around the federal poverty level, I'm not interested in having a limit. I think if you have had any sort of an eviction and if you've lost your job, all of us are one paycheck away, and anyone can fall into that trap. And so I would not want us to limit ourselves and to allow anyone to fall into that. So I would not want us to have a limit.
Commissioners, are there other questions that you'd like to get the sense from the commission before we take public comment, or are you ready for public comment?
I guess I'd like to kind of check a framework from what we were hearing in previous sessions. And that's, I think we have, I just want to name that I think we have a lot of overlapping issues that we're kind of lumping into a conversation around tenant right to counsel. And some of those that I heard from public comment previously, which we may or may not hear again, or things like, eviction record expungement, unmet maintenance needs, which that's one piece that falls, more into a city. If a city has a rental inspection, is that doing what it needs to? The idea of counterclaims, tenant education, and there was a talk about legal access, like at the time of signing a lease, which that is nothing to do with eviction, but an important piece too. Just wanted to kind of acknowledge, like, if we're talking about like, what's the conversation at the state level? It may not be tenant right to counsel. It may be integrated in one of these other pieces. And I don't think it's an either or, that if the state is having conversations, we should be involved with that. I think that 5-county conversation group is exactly the right place to have that. It's 60%, 5 counties with 60% of the state population, and the fact that there's some interest in kind of crossing over politics to talk about a shared issue there, I think is really important. Are you hearing what I'm hearing, that we've got multiple issues that we're kind of talking into like one solution, but they're not all connected to that solution?
Yes. I mean, I think all the issues we talk about here are pretty complicated and multi-layered. I am hearing a majority of commissioners who are feeling like they would like to do some work in development of a access to counsel, right to counsel program. I mean, and that's the majority I'm hearing. Maybe not all are there, but I'm hearing that. And then what I would suggest is, if that's where we are, if we don't feel like we want to move ahead with a code thing, and we do want to move ahead with some sort of exploring some program development, then I think it might be good to take some public comment and then give Sarah some feedback on what that program development looks like. I just want to make sure I'm characterizing. I don't think we have unanimous opinions that we should move ahead with program development. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, but
Curious enough to want to ask more questions and have access to more. So.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I am also hearing a majority of the commission express interest in finding out more about what really building this program could look like. So I think in my opinion, all of the questions that have been laid out by staff here and sort of the suggestions about contact with Kansas Holistic Defenders to better understand what their current grant situation looks like and what representation capacity has looked like within that can help us build some cost analysis. Talking with Douglas County Legal Aid and Kansas Legal Services for further information and insight about that. You know, I think that these are all questions I'm interested in staff exploring and being able to bring back some more concrete information to us with some recommendations about how to build out a program. I think one thing I want to say, you know, in response to your comments, Commissioner Willie, I see what you're saying, and I think, I mean, it is all connected, and there are a lot of issues that we've talked about within the context of tenant right to counsel that could or might be effectively addressed or at times resolved. But I don't think that we've talked about it in a way that, and I've not heard from any of the organizers or advocates and any of the research that I've done that suggests that it is something that really cures many or any of those things, but that it is a very effective tool in a toolbox used with other tools. And so, for example, habitability issues and inspection issues that the city of Lawrence and their code enforcement have their own processes for, and they also have limitations there. And one of the limitations, and I can speak to this from personal experience, is that there's not much more that they can do with any findings about possible habitability issues. It becomes something that has to be litigated in the court. And another example of how an eviction might come about is that somebody asks for an inspection of their rental unit based on habitability issues, based on mold, for example. That's a very common one. And they receive a special inspection from the city. Maybe mold is confirmed or whatever the other issue is confirmed that makes it not habitable. That effectively evicts the person from their home. I mean, it's because, of course, I'm going to completely blank on the correct legal term, but it abates the property. And so it effectively is evicting them. And again, there's no access to know about their rights or be able to talk to a lawyer. And so that's maybe not the best example, but there are instances where there's not much that there's not much teeth behind code enforcement, and until and unless it could or might be litigated in court. Sealing or expunging eviction records, that is something that is gaining some traction at the state, and I'm hopeful about, because that is a tool that would be can only be enacted by the state, right, in order to really limit the ability for property owners to look up public records and make assumptions based on that, even without having all available information. So, and similarly, I think we talked last time about how I believe that mediation will be a more attractive option for some landlords and property managers that have not historically engaged in it. And we have heard repeatedly in this meeting room from a variety of angles that mediation is not something that has been utilized by many landlords in this community. And I believe that like having tenant right to counsel established is something that can promote that as an alternative option or as a first stop before filing for court. So I just think it's sort of that one thing begets the other.
Yeah, and I think we had two things that have been kind of squished together that I think are likely separate. And like you talked about, you know, mediation doesn't necessarily mean mediation instead of having an attorney, but it's a lot more akin to what we had in our work session, where we're talking about supportive housing. We're having, you know, and supportive housing property managers, which that's not going to be all of them, but that space between the service provider and which this would be a service also from Douglas County and the landlord, which is just much more collaborative in nature. It's upstream from eviction. So if we talk about, you know, eviction being upstream from homelessness and, you know, and tackling it there is more cost effective, but being upstream from eviction is by far more useful to everybody. And that's where I think we missed the opportunity to have conversations. Granted, not every landlord will want to be in those conversations, but that's some of the questions that I was asking in our work session were related to that. And I think if we move forward in a conversation around tenant right to counsel or any of these other pieces we've talked about, I really want us to lean into that collaborative space, because if we have 50% of our of our housing, of people are renters, that means 50% of our housing stock is managed by landlords, and we need to be sensitive to those conversations and get more more allies in the work. And I think Douglas County in our work on supportive housing has been working in that sphere, and I don't want to see us lose that momentum. I think we need to learn from it.
Okay. Commissioners, I'd like to ask that we take just a few minutes of a break here. And then we'll take public comment. I want to make sure I'm fully engaged in all the public comment. So I just need about a 5-minute break, and then we'll jump into that. Before we take that break, I do want to recognize the organization work and the discussion that we're having about it not being code may seem, I'm guessing, I don't know, maybe seen as a loss, but I think what I'm hearing from the commission is wanting to continue to work towards some policy ideas there and working closely with those who brought us a draft of something to work up and to continue to let that mature. I also, Commissioner Willie, I'm glad to hear you think the 5 counties, because you have more experience with that group than I do. I think there is spaces where organizers could help us articulate to some other communities and help with some other communities organize the difference between mediation and counsel. And I'm really interested in if there's ways to incentivize certain mediation for that point, while also understanding that at some points that's limiting. So those are just some thoughts I had. I don't know why I felt like I needed to say them now before break, but I did. So if we could just take a 4-minute break, would that be okay, commissioners? And then we'll be back here at 7:20. All right, we're back in session here. Thanks for the break. We'll open it up for public comment. If you'd like to provide public comment on this item, you're welcome to come up. Remember, we have 3 minutes for each person who'd like to provide public comment. All right, I'm going to close public, not really. But if we don't have takers.
And we'll just say, if you want to provide your public comment, you can do that and then sign afterwards. And that way we can kind of keep it moving.
Hey, so once again, Mike Harold, worked as supportive housing case manager for 4 years. In that time, I worked with a lot of tenants. Many of them got served 1430s, 3-day pay or quits. Even some of them went to eviction court. And the response was pretty universal as soon as they got the 1430 or 3-day pay or quit. Oh my goodness, I'm being evicted. And then it develops into 2 responses from there. Either, okay, now I got to leave, which good luck in this city. Takes about 2 months to make that happen, at least if you're outside of April and August. The other response is, screw it, I'll just get hauled out by the sheriff. Both of those are very bad responses, because that is the worst case scenario for everybody involved, including the county. Right? Because now you've got somebody with an eviction on the record. They've gone through that legal process and been evicted. They're now more dependent on the city services and a variety of other things. That increases your costs. It is more cost effective for them to have somebody show up and go, no, that wasn't the eviction. You're now being taken to eviction court. And there are ways for us to mitigate the harm and get you out of this in a way that serves everybody better, right? A lawyer isn't going to show up and tell a tenant that they need to go fight an unwinnable battle. They're going to show up and go, hey, you're behind on your rent. Is there any way for you to get caught up on this? right? Because that was what I did. 6 tenants that I helped avoid eviction, except for one. And the only reason that one didn't is because they didn't meet with me. An eviction is intensely easy to avoid if you simply know what it is. It's that legal process. Courts are not interested in evicting people if they go, here, landlord, here's my keys. Here, landlord, here's the rent. It is so easy to avoid if people just simply have somebody to show up and explain their rights to them and help them navigate the process. Thank you. Have a good day.
I understand wanting to cheer him on. We'll just move on to the next one.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Hiller. I'm an attorney, and I've worked on hundreds of eviction cases.
Mike, be real close to that mic so we can hear you.
Beg your pardon. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've seen in my practice about people who face eviction. The first thing I want to get to, something we don't really talk about with Lawrence, is the number of how this affects rural Kansans specifically. Rural Kansans are in the unfortunate position of being bearers of large amounts of property and assets. For instance, combines, tractors, all these things as tenant farmers, including as tenant farmers for concerns like ConAgra and Syngenta. And when those eviction processes happen, we see some of the worst denials of people's rights. And this happens on both sides. And I think that is something that bears noticing, is that there can be tenants who are at fault in evictions, but there can also be landlords. We've seen cases where landlords took off people's doors, took off people's roofs, locked people out, cut off utilities, all in violation of Kansas law. And all of those happened in rural Kansas, where people have the least access to the courts. One of the interesting things that you guys have brought up a little bit is the big R, little r. And fortunately enough, we don't have to worry about that, because what we have prescribed in Kansas law is the Uniform Landlord-Tenant Act, as adopted in 1974 with the Kansas Landlord-Tenant Act. And it provides explicitly statutory remedies. It is not landlords, as Councilman Dorsey said, having to struggle to, fight their own interests somehow. It is simply applying the law to each and every Kansan when they come into court, whether they are a landlord or an attorney. Unfortunately, as it stands, there is no money for tenants' attorneys. Tenants' attorneys do not exist. Is that 1 minute left, or? All right. Okay. I think that's all I have, but thank you guys.
So once again, Howard Callahan, Burt Nash, path worker. Some of the comments that Commissioner Dorsey was mentioning in terms of needing data. In my experience, when it comes to providing services and the data connected to the need for services, you generally need to have, most of that data is furnished by the providers providing the service. When it comes to prevention generally in Lawrence, we're funding not even like a fraction with respect to the need. We've got one staff member funded by the county. We've got one staff member, as far as I know, at Catholic Charities that are providing the services that are available. And they will, I'm sure, freely admit they can't even meet the need of all of the folks that are being addressing, that are coming to them, even restricting eligibility for that service for folks that are currently facing eviction. So, I mean, in order to get the data to demonstrate the need, you need the staff and programming providing the service. And we currently don't, not anywhere close to adequately, in my opinion. So to that point, another thing that I wanted to mention was kind of in reflection with what Mike was saying. I mean, an eviction court proceeding is not a criminal charge, but it has implications, and it has implications that impact both the client and the community. If I've got a client that is on a housing voucher and their landlord is, pressing eviction, one, it ends up being, at least unless they can possibly get representation, the choices represent themselves pro se in a civil litigation or get out of there before that eviction is on their record and they are no longer eligible for a voucher for, I believe it's 5 years. And in many cases, the community loses that voucher, which costs us money if we're going to try to match that resource. Comparing it to the right to representation in criminal litigation, it falls in this ambiguous territory because it's a civil litigation, but it has direct material consequences that are effectively punitive. There's not going to be an established way of approaching that. It falls in that weird middle ground where there are no services and there are no resources and there is no recourse unless we actually get people attempting to apply those services and have our community be in a focused way attempting to address whether or not our standards are being met regarding those rights and needs. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Katie Kraus. I live here in Lawrence, Kansas on a Section 8 voucher. I'm your neighbor and someone who's been evicted with no attorney, slept outside after losing everything, and survived sex trafficking that followed homelessness. I live with ADHD, PTSD, borderline personality disorder, major depression, and generalized anxiety. Door that locks and meds in my cabinet, the weather calms and I can show up in my community. After one eviction, my life I could carry. It's gone, medicine gone. No lawyer, just that moved faster than I could speak. Later, as a trafficking survivor, every hello felt like danger. This is what no counsel looks like. You don't lose a case. You lose your footing and your care. Nationally, around 1 in 4 adults experiencing homelessness lives with serious mental illness, and roughly half live with mental illness. Eviction is a tipping point. When housing is lost, stop. In Spanish, IDs, insurance cards, and prescriptions disappear. Medication adherence collapses. The basics of treatment, safe storage for meds, a clock for dosing, a ride to clinic, depend on a stable address. Without it, recovery plans built over months can disintegrate in a week, and spirals into crisis, ER visits, and psychiatric holds become far more likely. Right to counsel is a clinical intervention as much as a legal one. Counsel shows the process for fairness, puts the law on both sides of the table, and turns panic into negotiation. Most represented tenants remain housed, which means care continues uninterrupted. Meds are refilled on time, therapy remains consistent, case managers can find clients, and the risk of relapse, hospitalization, and street homelessness drops. This is preventative medicine for our community. Lawrence's own evidence echoes this urgency. Renters report hazardous conditions, fear of retaliation, and weak enforcement that force low-income tenants, especially those managing mental health concerns, to choose between health and housing. That choice is a false one when counsel is present. Please fund tenants' right to counsel in Douglas County. Real coverage from filing to resolution. You'll reduce homelessness, stabilize families, and protect people living with serious mental health conditions who are doing everything they can to stay well and contribute. I lost everything more than once. I fought my way back to a home and a life where healing is real and community work is a responsibility I can carry. Give the next tenant what I never had, a lawyer at their side or the bottom falls out. Choose justice before crisis, and please fund tenants' right to counsel. Thank you. Katie Kraus.
Hi, I'm Vince Munoz.
obviously you've heard from me before. I want to clarify some things about the process too, because there was a lot of kind of obsession with the process. This time last year, the county government actually did start a work group to answer many of the questions that the county administrator has now presented to you as if they're sort of new questions, right? The deputy county administrator was there, another county staff member was there, Lawrence Tennants was invited along with a bunch of other service providers. So this was last year, I mean, literally this time last year in October of 2024. The idea was that that work group would write an ordinance or would write something that could be presented to you through the normal budgetary process, right? Ultimately, that work group after 5 months was discontinued. There were some staff changes, so I mean, there were some like reasons for that, but there was, no further communications about when the new staff would be hired, when they would be onboarded to start the work group again, and like how we could work with that process and what that timeline looked like. And so we took it upon ourselves to say, why wait? Because we did try to go through the normal process. We did talk to county staff and administration, and we did our best to try to work through that process. So I don't think we should be punished for trying to follow that process and then these roadblocks that we had no control over being, put in the way. And so that's part of the reason why we're interested too in a resolution, is because we want more county buy-in. I think we've heard tonight from the county administration, they feel like they need more direction from you. And a resolution could clearly state like, here's what you should do every year in the budget for us. And so to that end, I think we have two things that we'd like you to consider tonight. The first is to just amend the existing service agreement you have with Kansas Holistic Defenders. As it has been noted, $40,000 has been set aside for the self-help desk budget for eviction defense. And so that actually is in the budget. That can be given to Kansas Holistic Defenders next year to just increase the number of representation, even if it's not for everyone, for the calendar year 2026. If there's some supplemental money that needs to be involved with that too, that can come from the general fund, and you may not like to do that, but that could get us representation sooner rather than later, even if not for everyone, for many, many people. And we have heard from them, from some of those legal providers, that one more attorney would make a huge difference in terms of just who's currently showing up. The next thing we would like you to do, in addition to amending the existing service agreement, is to, again, direct the county administration to work on that language that we could present to you. So that way, county administration is not constantly saying like, we need more feedback from the commission. We want them to feel like in every budget, every year, that they're going to fully fund a right to counsel program. Obviously, you can direct them to change that as that process works, but we just feel that there needs to be a little bit more accountability there. And so again, if you're going to say, well, you guys didn't follow the process, that's not really accurate. We did work with county staff over a year ago, and yeah, there have been some roadblocks, but we tried. And that's kind of why we're in this position too. So it goes both ways. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kemi. I'm with Femi Promise of Lawrence. I'm one of the program managers. And thank you, commissioners, for having this conversation. I would like to put a story, or if you want to envision a face, to this conversation. So this is a story of a single mom who was able to overcome the barrier of low income and criminal background to get into a place. She had a budget, was able to afford rent, but unfortunately, a few months into a lease, she found out that she was already amounting late fees because of unpaid rent. Now, she did pay her rent, but there was a charge for, I think, washer and dryer, which she did not use and was not on her lease. She eventually got evicted. Right, and you just did a proclamation earlier this month as Domestic Violence Month. I think passing this ordinance stops not just eviction cycle, but also abuse, right? Because she was evicted and had to live with the abusive ex. So when you're thinking about this, I want you to put faces and stories, to the conversations that we're having. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aaron. Property management, apartment managers, landlords, they all have access to legal resources that most people don't. Having some kind of legal representation or mediation would at least create some kind of moral level playing field, or at least help inform people to what their rights are. I just want to talk about a particularly vulnerable population, which is people who were recently homeless or people who have recently been rehoused. There's a lot of victimization there, and anytime the county funds or one of their contracted partners help put money towards somebody's rent or pays a down payment, like, and I have my own situation when I was evicted. When I went to my eviction proceedings, there were 30 other people from my apartment complex who were also in there on county budget vouchers. And basically, we all had the same story. Our landlord evicted us for illegal activities. And basically, I spent a lot of time on the phone with the sheriff's department. Basically, our landlord was calling in like fake cop calls. Like I remember one time the cop showed up at my door because somebody said there was a stabbing at my apartment. It was just completely ridiculous because I was just watching TV. But the apartment manager kept making fake police reports so that he could establish a record that we were having illegal behavior so that he could evict us. And then lo and behold, after he got us out, like he got, the county was on the hook for paying the rent for a whole year. And then after he kicked us out, he was able to move in a whole bunch of new crop of people that the county was paying for.
Hi, my name's Darcy Camp Schrader. I'm a case manager in supportive housing at Burton Ash. And I just want to support some of a lot of things that have already been said, but I work with people that have serious mental illness. And they can be like like you said, one paycheck or one event away from facing eviction. And then treatment plans that we've been working on for months can just unravel in a matter of days because then medications lapse and panic and anxiety set in. And then we go from the recovery mode to back to crisis mode. So I had some help with some statistics. In Douglas County, only about 3% of tenants currently have legal representation in eviction cases. And that's kind of a safety net that's missing. And again, many clients, so they lose like not only medication, regular medication, which is essential, but also like all their vital documents and I've had a lot of clients who I'm like, well, where's, your partner's death certificate? Well, it was lost in the foreclosure or and so, trying to just apply for different benefits and things that they really need, it becomes difficult because they don't have all their history of papers, with them. So people end up sleeping outside or in cars or on couches, and they become super hyper vigilant, and trust collapses. And our clinical work then is stabilization instead of recovery. So with counsel at the time of filing, the process could slow enough for it to be fair, and information could go both ways. And negotiations can happen before people fall through the cracks. So renters make up nearly half of households in Douglas County. I think someone said that already. And many are cost burdened. People fear retaliation for reporting hazardous conditions. And we estimate around 600 eviction filings last year. Tenant legal help was the exception and not the rule. We also know what works because of what they've been doing in Kansas City, Missouri. with roughly 79 to 82% of represented cases ended in dismissal or a ruling for tenants. And a local civil representation effort were here handled 49 Douglas County cases. 83% of those ended in dismissal or avoided an eviction
Darcy,
judgment. Is it
that's time.
ban? Okay, I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm Joe Cassad and I'm with Justice Matters. I'm excited to hear that a majority of the commission favors a policy supporting the just and sensible proposal for a tenant's right to counsel in Douglas County. The Place for Everyone plan is a comprehensive solution with many moving parts, and the parts need to fit together. Ensuring that tenants' rights are recognized has been shown to be a very inexpensive and efficient way to reduce homelessness. It doesn't help to plug one hole if you're leaving other holes open. We need to keep our eyes on the prize. Ending chronic homelessness isn't just about doing the right thing for our homeless brothers and sisters. It will also save the community lots of money, as in $35,000 per year for each homeless person, according to reputable studies. And it will make our community safer, more manageable, and more livable. There was a question about why homeowners like me would want to support this, because it makes for a better county and better cities. The value of these benefits far outweighs the modest cost of simply seeing that the rights of our tenant neighbors are observed before turning them out on the street. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jason Mayman, 66049. I'm a tenant in Douglas County, but I'm also speaking tonight on behalf of Lawrence DSA, or Democratic Socialists of America. I'm the interim chair. I'm here today because Lawrence DSA stands in strong support of the successful implementation of a tenant right to counsel program, a program that this commission voted for a year ago. And we believe that for this program to truly meet its goal of preventing evictions and stabilizing families, it has to be built on two foundational principles. First, the program must provide full legal representation. I'm happy to hear that most of the commission seems to be in favor of that, as opposed to means testing. For a tenant that's facing a complex and intimidating eviction process, access to a lawyer for the entire case is what levels the playing field. It's what shifts the balance of power between tenants and landlords. Partial advice or limited resources cannot achieve the outcomes that all of us as a community want. And the local data on this is clear. With full representation, the vast majority of cases are resolved successfully, which keeps families in their homes and stabilizes communities. And that's the core of an effective program. Second, for the program to be trusted and effective long-term, it requires meaningful guidance from the people that it serves, the people closest to the problem or closest to the solution. So there needs to be a permanent oversight committee that is actually led by tenants and community advocates, because that would help provide essential insight and accountability, which is needed to ensure that the program remains accessible, culturally relevant, and competent, and responsive to our community's needs. It's not just a recommendation, that is a best practice for sustainable success. And I want to remind the commission of like the overarching political climate that we're in right now, because I think it's important for programs like this too. Because right now we're facing a government shutdown because our current administration thought it was more important to give tax cuts to the rich and cut off Medicaid and SNAP for millions of working class families. And that's going to have a direct impact on whether or not those families can afford their housing. All of these costs are interrelated. For most working class people, housing is their number one expense. So if we want to actually remain a community that cares about our working class residents, then we have to fully implement this program. We can't operate in half measures. So Lawrence DSA stands in full support of this program. We hope that you put it with those two foundational principles on October 22nd. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ben Anderson, and like a lot of people that were here speaking before me, I work at Burton Ash currently as the housing specialist for the ACT team. Um, just kind of wanted to put stories and faces to some of the people that you could help by approving this. And I know you all were discussing if it's a little r or a big R, right? But I mean, either way, it could be a precedent to set to go forward next and make this law with the different cities in the county and kind of just make this a better county overall. So in my work, I've worked with a lot of people who get evicted for various reasons. And one that stuck out to me when Howard asked me to come here today was a person who the system was working for perfectly. Um, she had been approved for disability, and we knew that she wouldn't be able to work for very much longer. And she was on a wait list for a housing voucher. And just almost like it was fate, right as her disability kind of hit a tipping point and she was no longer able to work and no longer able to afford her rent, the next month she was approved for a housing voucher. The landlord then, said, proceed, fine. And because somebody had come and tried to kick in her door earlier in that month, there was damage to the lock that the LDCHA deemed was dysfunctional and had asked the landlord to fix. He then proceeded to not fix it as she had already moved in and had already signed a lease, and he did not feel the need to, and then went and evicted her. She was asking me for legal counsel when I have no business giving that to anybody. It's not anything that I've ever trained for, gone to school for, read about. And I was left trying to pick up the pieces for and with this person who had nobody to really even the playing field for them, to really give them the rights that we afford so many other people in different aspects of the criminal justice system. And so with that as well, I also lived off Harvard Road for 5 years and was a perfect tenant for Paula Hedges. And when her husband died, we baked her dinner and brought it over there. And unfortunately, when she sold the properties, all the good graces and all those rights, that I might have had kind of went out the door. And when it was bought, the man who bought it told me he was raising the rent by hundreds of dollars and ripped up my lease in front of me and said, if you can't do it, get out. And on my lunch breaks, at the time I worked at the Mad Greek and called every lawyer in town, and it was going to be about 3 to 4 weeks of my pay to get a lawyer that I couldn't afford, even though most of them said, you have a case, And with that, I guess I'd say, just hopefully can give some more faces to the stories of people you could help.
Hello, my name is Rowan Schring, 66044. And I wanted to echo some of the sentiments that I've heard from some of the other public commenters about how obviously evictions and these unconscionable practices, some unconscionable actions from certain landlords disproportionately affect very vulnerable people. But it is very difficult, even just as someone who's not in like a especially vulnerable position, to get legal representation as a tenant. I have been in a situation before where a landlord was charging me illegally for something that was not my responsibility, and I knew that it wasn't. I knew what my rights were, but it didn't really functionally matter that I was educated about my rights because I reached out to lots of lawyers, and every single one either was with an agency that was so inundated with people who needed help that they couldn't handle the case, they couldn't take the case, or other lawyers who said, oh, we only represent from the landlord side, sorry. And even if I had found, a lawyer, it's quite possible that the costs of that would have been more than the fee that the landlord was legally charging me anyway. and I was fortunate in that position to be able to pay it, but a lot of people can't. And so a lot of these, a lot of these rights that tenants have under state law just aren't functionally enforced without having access to a lawyer in these kinds of situations. And I think it's really important. And I was hearing the discussion from y'all earlier, and I really appreciate that y'all are considering this and hearing us out about this. I appreciate this time. And I know that there was some discussion about different efforts that are being made at different levels of government. And I just really want to stress that it would mean the world to me and to the community to not use that discussion as a reason to not take action at the county level. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Samia. I live in 66044. I want to echo what a lot of folks have said, especially with concerns to the budgetary aspects of funding a tenant's rights to counsel. We've already spoken to the fact that those funds are largely paid in terms of like downstream effects of addressing houselessness, and then also in the moment effects of paying for the legal self-help office at the district court. I spoke last time as a volunteer of the legal self-help office about how insufficient that is as a resource, as volunteers, and even the paid staff of the self-help office cannot offer specific or legal advice to genuinely intervene in eviction cases. But another effect that I wanted to talk about is in cities or municipalities that have created right to counsel programs or similar programs. There's also been a decrease, even like up to 50% of eviction filings, not just evictions that went through, but the filings themselves, because those filings were likely to not hold up if there was a lawyer arguing on the tenant side, whether they were illegal or unfair or like poorly delivered. And that is an effect that Lawrence and Douglas County will likely not see unless the program that we are constructing tenants' rights to counsel with is expansive. If it is a limited program, I doubt that we will see the effect of like filings themselves lowering and thus affecting how much we are paying for lawyers to represent evictions and how many evictions are directly affecting the amount of like houseless individuals we have. So knowing that you all have discussed how much you want this type of program to go through city and state, I just wanted to say that given that the issue is at your door, obviously wanting to pull in those other types of government is wonderful, and it is an incredible opportunity that will be so impactful to the people in your constituency and financially impactful to both city, county, and state levels to address it right now. Thank you for your time.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. My name is Cassandra Barrett, and I'm a renter in Douglas County. I am here today to support codifying a tenant right to counsel in county code. That code should ensure that every tenant in this county has full legal representation in the case of an eviction. To ensure that we see the significant lasting benefits of cost savings and positive health outcomes and housing stability that we've discussed in this space previously, tenants should have a head seat at the table when developing and administering this program. The code should establish a permanent tenant-run oversight committee. From the systemic review of tenant right to counsel programs that was previously presented to this body, this was actually one of the primary program features beyond the core right that other municipalities, including counties, recommended implementing and some regretted not establishing from the start. Such a tenant committee ensures that the county is actually meeting our tenant needs and code and not just implementing a program in name only. We're concerned that some of the initial proposals from administration and some of the suggestions here may not fully embrace that full representation for everyone and tenant oversight that are so important to us. We ask that you, as commissioners, please guide administration back to the table with us. We're excited to talk more to incorporate these essential elements. We understand that this is an unusual circumstance, but our housing crisis requires unusual and assertive action. Our code modification, as written with several lawyers with expertise in this area, absolutely still allows for funding and collaboration with cities. From our discussion with staff, we were told that adding the code change to Chapter 1 would allow it to cover all county residents. It would include an RFP for services. We've thought about a lot of these things that I hear you all asking great questions about as well. Our code change as proposed has a phase-in period consistent with taking time to develop programming and funding and streams that after the code is changed, we can make sure that all the details are in place. The cost savings alone are likely to cover the program costs, given the evidence of cost savings by every single municipality that has codified this right previously. You all have an amazing ability to do this. Please don't kick this can down the road. Illegal evictions are happening now in Douglas County on a regular basis, and they need to stop. I would just ask you all to think about if one of your loved ones was in that eviction answer docket on Friday, if you would want them to be here alone. That's an important question, as well as all these details. So ultimately, we as tenants can help you answer those detailed issues. We respectfully urge you to place a proposal that includes full legal representation for all tenants and tenant oversight on the agenda for October 22nd. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other public comment. Don't hesitate, folks.
Good evening. My name is Carson Walker, and I'm a tenant and community member who cares deeply about housing in Douglas County. Firstly, I'm here to say that tenant right to counsel must provide full legal representation for successful implementation. The local data that has been referenced throughout this process is clear. With full representation, the vast majority of cases are resolved successfully in favor of tenants. This keeps families in their homes, something that I am in favor of. Alongside this, there must be a permanent oversight committee led by tenants and community advocates. This will ensure accountability and accessibility by the inclusion of relevant perspectives. These two essential elements must be incorporated into future proposals so our community may hopefully become a national model for its justice and compassion through tenant right to counsel. I urge you to place a proposal that includes said elements on the agenda for October 22nd. Thank you for your time and commitment to our community.
Good evening. My name is Genevieve Pressure. I've been a tenant here in Lawrence for the past 9 years. The idea behind a right to counsel in eviction court is simple but powerful: to make our justice system fair and to make sure landlords are held accountable under law. A program without the law behind it cannot achieve those goals. There are a million ways we could pilot a program, push paper, go back and forth with cities, but what we confirmed here today is that there is nothing preventing the county from codifying this in the code. If we had just gone to the city first, I can almost guarantee that they would have told us to take it up with the county. We can't treat tenant rights like a game of hot potato. As I understand it, there are two main pillars of what makes real right to counsel effective for tenants. The first pillar is holding landlords accountable. Right now, landlords know that when they want to file an eviction, the tenant won't have the resources to fight it. Nationwide, only about 3 to 4% of tenants have legal representation in eviction cases. When landlords know tenants will always have access to counsel, they think twice before filing a weak or unlawful eviction. They're also more likely to address repairs or negotiate lease issues fairly. because they can't just bank on a tenant showing up to court alone. I want to also get on the record against any eligibility limits or means testing, which would undermine that deterrent. If landlords know that some tenants won't qualify for representation, they will gamble. They'll continue filing more evictions and failing to maintain properties because they know this program does not cover most tenants. The second pillar is protecting the integrity of the justice system. The whole point of right to counsel is that cases should be decided on their merits, not on who can afford an attorney. A tenant just above the eligibility cutoff is no less vulnerable to losing their home than one just below it. Eviction is life altering, and representation shouldn't depend on a sliding scale of income. Now, we can only achieve real accountability and justice if we act with absolute commitment. Do not kick the can down the road on writing this into law. Do not allow detractors of right to counsel water this down under the guise of how things are normally done. We know that this is entirely feasible, and we know that you can do it at the county level, and then encourage city governments to follow. Codify the right to counsel into county code, fund the program, and instate a tenant-led oversight committee with no barriers and no exceptions. Tenants can't wait on this. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Micah Cox, 66044. We're here tonight to talk about this thing that we came and talked about last time, and it seems like I just moved back to Lawrence this past October, but I do remember it being on a conversation last October. So a year ago, we were still having these conversations. So it seems like there's some level of buy-in from y'all, some level of buy-in if a year's worth of conversations are happening. 51% of Lawrence residents are made up of renters. That's not counting the thousands more in Baldwin, Eudora, and across the county that you represent. Renters are the majority in Douglas County, and yet they're continued to be treated as an afterthought. This is unacceptable. There are two non-negotiables, I think, with this topic that lots of people have brought up, but I want to touch on them again. The first is that tenants need full legal representation. Facing eviction without a lawyer is like stepping into a fight with your hands tied behind your back. Y'all have the scissors. There was some conversation earlier about this being within your autonomy or authority or scope. And this issue is squarely within your authority as county commissioners. You have the power and responsibility to set policy, allocate funding, and codify programs that protect the health, safety, and stability of county residents. Ensuring tenants have access to a full legal representation is not optional. It is a core function that your office to serve the people who elected you, and failing to act is a failure of this commission to those people. Thank you.
Hello, commissioners. I'm really glad that this conversation is happening. I do want to speak to the urgency that I feel on tenant right to counsel.
You give
As a-
your name. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure. My name is Adriana. 66049 is my zip code. So as a social worker, I sit in the despair of families as they attempt to navigate what they will do as they are possibly displaced because of an eviction. I am limited in what I can provide and let them know that legal aid is not within my scope. So the resources that I can give them is incredibly limited. Expecting that those that are being evicted know the legal process, the language to represent themselves while they are also figuring out if they, or in my line of work, their children will have shelter that night is just unjust. Enacting not only a program, but a resolution or code shows that this is also a stance and urgency of our government. A government with leadership voted in to represent and be in service to its people. So please move forward to enact not only a program, but a policy. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Gabby Sprague, 66044. Just a couple data points for us. So according to American Community Survey data, there's around 25,220 rental households in Douglas County. That's 50.5% of Douglas County's residents. And in Lawrence, it's 56% according to the 2018 housing study. So one could maybe assume that a greater portion of your constituency is renters. I also want to state that there were 581 evictions filed last year, and more than 90% of landlords did not choose to mediate when offered during the 2021 pilot mediation program. If you establish a tenant right to counsel in a county code revision, it is you publicly stating that you will make every effort to ensure that every tenant facing eviction has access to a lawyer. In what Lawrence tenants propose, there is a phase-in process that allows for us to discuss program specifics. We also talk with 3 lawyers, and from what we learned, there are options regarding the funding, such as a subject to appropriations clause. Doing the math for a mill levy increase, and I'm not super versed in this, but it would be great to look into it further. An average of $9 increase per year for homes valued at $300,000 would more than cover a tenant right to counsel program. And county staff can work towards ensuring that there's other funding coming in to offset any costs. Also, just a note that tenants already pay for property taxes through our rent to our landlords for their residential property tax and other property tax like vehicles. I don't think that any tenant in this space is under the impression that we won't have to continue engaging our government to ensure our rights are upheld, especially experiencing this process from the passing of the housing and homelessness plan to now. I'm feeling pretty distrusting of a government that will pass a housing and homelessness plan and then choose not to fund it. What's the point of the plan? 3 out of the 5 commissioners here gave the support for a tenant right to counsel on May 8th, 2024, 511 days ago when passing the plan. It should be in the county code. It should ensure every person that faces eviction has access to the resulting program and give tenants a meaningful seat at the table by implementing a tenant oversight committee in the county code revision. I feel like we've hit on all the reasons many times. I just really wish that commissioners could put themselves in tenants' shoes. Landlords have all the power in evictions, and establishing a tenant right to counsel would ensure that some of that power is placed back into tenants' hands in situations where landlords are abusing it. Please put tenant right to counsel into the code, ensure that any tenant who needs it is eligible, and that a permanent tenant oversight committee oversees the program's development. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Anna Bailey. I live at 66044. We started today's session celebrating the hard and important work that community members are doing to support county's children, survivors, and seniors. All of that reflects Douglas County's ambition to promote community care. That's an important reason why I live here. In that same vein, I want to live in a county where everyone has access to stable housing, and a critical step towards that goal is to make sure that tenants have the ability to enforce their existing state rights. We all know that we're falling short of that right now, not only for Lawrencians, but also residents of Baldwin City, Eudora, Lecompton, and elsewhere in the county. The county already provides an array of important services to all residents, and it's my earnest hope that a tenant right to counsel will be among them soon. I appreciate that today I've heard a majority of commissioners express a desire to take action and to make a tenant right to counsel a reality here. And I also appreciate that I've heard some desire to be intentional and thoughtful about that. I get a sense that you want to get it right. I'm a public policy professional. I understand that the details matter. But in the meantime, people are getting eviction notices and they're facing it alone. You've already heard stories today about what that looks like and feels like. The research about the impact of tenant right to counsel is compelling. We don't need more studies. We don't need more reports. We need to get to action. You have thought partners here who are eager and willing to work with you and to ensure that every tenant has access to counsel. And moreover, you're hearing directly from the people who are facing these challenges, and they're making their asks very clear. Full
legal representation codified and a central role of tenants in not only shaping the policies, but also overseeing them as they are implemented. So with all of that in mind, I urge the commission to move forward towards implementation with deliberate speed. Thank you so much for your time.
Hello, my name is Adam Lang, 66044. In addition to Lawrence Tenants, I'm also a member of the group Save the Walkers River Valley, which has been opposing development on the floodplain south of, I don't know highways very well, but south of the highway. Essentially, one of the future trends that I see in Lawrence is the trend of development. And I see a lot of this development as a lot of it, they initially came forward and wanted to develop commercially, but then they decided they were going to create affordable housing. And with Lawrence Tenants, I've also canvassed on areas that have been built on floodplains. A lot of these developers have been building in areas that are incredibly dangerous to build on because of flooding events that are happening more with climate change. And in response to this, we had a meeting essentially with housing for the development of many of these planned places. And housing, in response to us asking what happens if these buildings flood, housing was essentially told us word for word, these are renters. And we kept
Adam, make sure that your comments are specifically about right to counsel. The
This
county doesn't approve any buildings within the city of Lawrence.
Understood, but it's all about renters' rights. So essentially, we were told by the county that these are just renters, and that is a common sentiment that we've heard. With these developments being built in dangerous areas, there is a need there for renters to have more rights because these developers, where they are building them in very dangerous places, in very dangerous conditions, it is incredibly important right now for renters to have all the rights that they can possibly have through this. And tenant right to counsel is an avenue to hold people to building safer developments, whether or not that's within your purview, which I'm sure it's not, but it's very important that we have our rights. So thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Doug Newman, and I am a tenant here in Lawrence at 66049. I would like to speak to the issue of tenant right to counsel from the perspective of a volunteer with the Lawrence chapter of Food Not Bombs. For a little background, Food Not Bombs is a local grassroots volunteer organization with a focus on feeding people, community building, mutual aid, and solidarity. And our main operation primarily consists of weekly meal preparation and distribution to our unhoused neighbors. Now, through these activities, many of us develop familiarity and trust with those we serve, and we come to understand the staggering lack of access to basic resources faced by many in these communities. Just about everything you could think to do in your day-to-day life is orders of magnitude more difficult without access to stable housing. From getting a drink of water, going to get some groceries, keeping your possessions secure, going to a doctor's appointment, applying for a job, the list goes on. And obviously, this doesn't even scratch the surface just from some of what other people have talked about tonight of what people can face in these situations. And we can add to that list here in Lawrence as of September 12th, just living outside of unhoused services. Anyone in Lawrence now living outside on city property is subject to scrutiny from the Lawrence Police Department, fines of up to $1,000, jail time, or all of the above. And so in the absence of tenant right to counsel, we are creating a system of policy in which a tenant illegally evicted by their landlord ends up in prison while the landlord faces no accountability whatsoever. I think we can all agree that this is a travesty of justice and is a critical defect in our system of policy. We need tenant right to counsel, we need it now, and we need it done right. And just to reiterate what other people have talked about, that means full legal representation and oversight committee consistent of tenants. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Devin Middleton.
I am a lifelong resident of Douglas County, currently a renter in 66049. I just want to reiterate what everyone else has said, that I support codifying tenant right to counsel in the code with the two pillars of full representation, not means tested, and second pillar. The second one everyone else said. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll check and see if there's anyone online. There's no one online. Okay, we'll close public comment. Bring it back up to the commission.
I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to make just a clarification that the conversations we're having up here do not constitute a vote on any program or project or funding or any of that. So we've been talking about, like, do we have enough interest to move forward? I just didn't want that to be construed as that we've taken a vote of any sort.
Yes, and any commissioner could make a motion at any point, and we'll see where it goes, right? So, yeah. So Sarah left.
I'll cover one thing. So I don't know if other commissioners received other communications from community members. This isn't an action item that requires ex parte, but I just think it's, hearing from more voices is always important. I didn't see them come through into the packet, so I just want to make sure we also heard voices that are not interested in seeing tax dollars used for tenant right to counsel. One of those kind of self-identified as a landlord, the other one did not.
Okay, commissioners, so Sarah had given us some things that she would like some guidance on. And maybe we could start to tackle some of those questions. So I'm just going to list them here. So what community partners, groups, individuals do we recommend we consult with? Do we want to look at eligibility guidelines? Can a program be combined with other efforts? Do we want to learn more about rental inspection? Is there anyone that commissioners like to tackle first? Or are there others that you want to raise up?
I think what seems simple to me to address, and Commissioner Anderson and I expressed our positions on this earlier, but I'm interested to hear other commissioners' thoughts about the question around eligibility guidelines and income constraints, because I think that's a big question. If we're directing staff today to move forward with gathering more information specifically from local partners and other local program or regional programming that can help inform further, that's a key question about whether or not it's going to be developed. So I feel very strongly that it's not appropriate. Most of many, I shouldn't say most because I haven't actually added up the list in my research, but many of the communities who have started a tenant right to counsel program with some types of means testing or limited in some way or another have later changed that, and they have expanded it to be a fully accessible program to anybody facing an eviction in that community. I think that's what should be the qualifying factor for a lot of the reasons that we heard in public comment, and also on an administrative burden level, it doesn't make sense to me to add any more work to an already very aggressive and time-limited process.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to put any guidelines on it, looking at the total number of evictions we had. I think we can work within that without putting overdue burden. If it was a much larger number, I think I would maybe have more reservations, but at this time, I don't want to put that restraint on it.
I might caution us in talking about the number of evictions in Douglas County because the only number that we're able to capture is the ones that go all the way to the legal process of eviction. And I think what we're hearing is that a lot of folks don't go that far. They either move out or they rectify it in some other way. So I'm not sure we know that it's 581 that would become a part of the conversation.
Well, Commissioner Willie, I believe that we are talking about it in the context of when an eviction gets filed, an eviction being the action in the court. And so you're right, we heard some comments about, and I as a service provider have navigated this sort of lack of awareness or education piece for tenants around the difference between a 3-day notice, a 1430 notice for whatever violations may be alleged, and an eviction filing. And in my opinion, what we're talking about is limited to, there's all the other sort of tools in the toolbox and resources and services that we hope can help prevent evictions before it gets to that filing, that can help educate and intervene. And when somebody receives a 3-day notice, which has not been filed with the court yet. But tenant right to counsel would be a right that is triggered by the act of a court filing. And that court filing that then requires that the court produce a notice to the tenant about the filing against them, their right to appear at court and when that court date is. And then adding to that, hopefully, this is a right to access legal counsel, and this is how you do that. So I think that we are only talking about, we can only sort of work off of the average number of eviction filings per year. Now we might see that number change. I would hope that we might see it go down over time as an effect of this program. We might need years of information to tell us that correlation. But I think that we do have a pretty good handle on at least the average or, maybe highest amount of evictions that might be filed.
I appreciate the clarification. And I guess in my mind, kind of some of those like other topics that that I kind of laid out that have a lot of overlap. This was one that I had in my mind in terms of they are resulting in people not being housed, but they're not a legal eviction filing. And is there work in that space, or are we just at this point talking about those that have been filed? So it sounds like at least that's what we're hearing here.
That's a fair question to pose. Yeah.
I think it's a good question to pose. I maybe don't know all that you're talking about there. One I think is when just leases are not renewed, and I don't know what recourse we might have there. Are there others you're thinking about?
I'm thinking of like a 3-day notice that instead of responding to the 3-day notice, they assume that that's a full eviction and they just move out or something like that. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure we understand or know the whole picture of people who are moving out of housing that may not have that full legal process. And tenant right to counsel then wouldn't be triggered in that case. But I think it's still a conversation to be had.
I want to check in with Sarah. Do we need to take a break? Is there anything that you need? Would that be helpful for you right now? Okay. How much time do you need? 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back at 8:35. Okay, we're back from our break. And we had discussed eligibility guidelines. Is there anything more we want to talk about when it comes to eligibility guidelines to give Sarah some direction?
Well, I have to say, kind of coming in, I had an interest in kind of knowing what the range of possibilities were and what other communities have done and tried. I'm still interested in that, but I find it compelling if we kind of have a known number that we're talking about, that helps us put some dollar figures on it without getting into this part. I still want to know kind of, what other communities are doing, but I wouldn't hold fast to an eligibility guideline with the number we're talking about without more information. So I appreciate commissioners talking to that.
Anything else on that one? How about, can the program be combined with other efforts to achieve access to counsel? So I think, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, that's probably Kansas Holistic Defenders mostly, right? Or are you thinking something else?
I'd also like to talk to Kansas Legal Services and learn more about what services they have available and how it could work with them and how it's similar to things that they've done in Shawnee County. So those are probably the first two, but we'd be open to other thoughts and ideas.
I don't want to rule out what partners might come to the table for that. I know KU legal program through their law school is another possibility. I think maybe they used to be in this work and they're not now. So that's a conversation to be had. I think we may find some logical overlap if we're talking about combining with other programs. I just think we don't know what that looks like yet.
I would say, I'm looking at the last question. I'm just jumping around, so sorry about that. Do we want to learn more about rental inspection program of the city of Lawrence? I don't want to muck up with them. Right. I'd sort of like to set that off to the side. I think some of the public comment that we had in the past was how it could improve code violations just by knowing that there may be counterclaims. And so I kind of want to set our program and figure out what the impacts are. I do appreciate Commissioner Anderson's desire to sort of partner with those groups. And I think that may be on some of us as commissioners to meet with city commissioners in individual cities and sort of talk about what we've learned about this, where we're going, how we are requesting their assistance in this. But as far as that, that's not really that important to me, but if others.
I do think there's conversations that need to be had in kind of ferreting out what is that program doing and what is it not doing. And so we kind of have a shared understanding of kind of the experience of tenants with that program. Understand it doesn't do everything and it won't. But I think what we're doing is kind of, all those other topics that I was kind of listing out, we're kind of picking out like what's the lane we're actually going to be talking about. And I think at this point, it's probably not about deferred maintenance unless that's coming in as a counterclaim in an eviction proceeding. Is that what I'm kind of hearing, that we're talking about a pretty narrow set of circumstances?
I think for me, the way I would characterize it is the acknowledgement that code violations, habitability issues, deferred maintenance, the whole, spectrum of issues that exist in that realm are issues that sometimes are relevant in evictions. They're not relevant in every eviction, but they are sometimes relevant in evictions. So I think, to me, the conversations around that have really just been about how tenant right to counsel can effectively help address some of those issues for some of those tenants, the tenants who it's gotten to the court process where litigation is now the only thing possible to get to a resolution, presumably because any attempts at resolving it otherwise, or perhaps seeking assistance from the city to inspect or the housing authority to do a special inspection if they're on a voucher, that those things have not resulted in a resolution to their issues. And it may not be particularly tied to the reason that they're being evicted, but if they're able to talk to counsel upon being evicted, then all of that history of the other efforts to resolve it becomes evidence for the court case and potentially becomes, counterclaims or relevant information. So I think it's, that this is something that can help address some of those issues in some instances, but it's not something that it's just going to address the issue of habitability, deferred maintenance, and sort of the fairly prolific bad behavior of some property managers and not being very well vested in maintaining their property. And they've not really had many instances of being held to account for that in my experience. And so I see this as a pathway that it might actually give some teeth to some of those the inspections, the enforcement of code, and maybe even some things that rise to the level of within the health department's purview. But that without this ability to litigate it in court and through the course of an eviction, if it's being used against them or if it's being ignored by the landlord, that's an opportunity to bring it up. So that was sort of meandering, but I think my main point is that I think that we are narrowing our field in terms of we are saying people who are facing eviction should be afforded a right to be able to seek legal counsel and address all relevant issues related to the housing that they are at risk of losing in that moment, and that's the moment that we're focusing on. And there's a lot of other possibility and opportunity for interventions and resolutions before that point, but once it gets to that point, how are we helping balance the scales and provide an appropriate venue to address those issues if they're relevant to that case? Does that help?
Commissioner Dorsey, Commissioner Anderson, thoughts on these questions?
Well, I thought Sarah had a good list of questions that she wants answered. I don't have the answers to them, though.
Are there things that you would like to give Sarah some direction on?
Hmm. Well, I'd like to learn what Kansas Legal Services is doing with Topeka. I'd like to explore possibilities with Douglas County Legal Aid and the KU Law School. I think that those might be good ideas. Mediation, I think, is always preferable to going to court in most cases.
I'm glad you brought that up, Commissioner Dorsey, because I think that's one of the questions on here is what community partner groups, individuals do you recommend we consult with? And so you talked about a couple there. I heard in our public comments about how mediation is not working at times for the tenant. My understanding was that landlords aren't looking at mediation either, and I'm curious why not? Like what is the limiting factor there? We haven't had landlords here, so is landlords a group that we think we should have some discussion with about what this program looks like?
I think so, because in Lawrence, I know we have a pretty good number of landlords that are mom and pop, and maybe they have one rental property. So if you have somebody that they're trying to evict for non-payment of rent, I think the law in Lawrence now is you have to give 30 days notice, not 3 days notice. I could be wrong on that, but by the time you get it through a court, you're 3 or 4 months of rent that the mom and pop person does not have. And if they're retired, that could be a significant source of income for them. So I think it would be good to consult with landlords. I'm not so sure the major players with large apartment complexes are the ones I'd want to hear from. It would be more the mom and pop type.
And if we're expanding, I guess, our view of those that we want to hear from, I'd also be interested in hearing from those that are actually processing the vouchers. I'd really be interested in hearing, because we heard tonight also in regards to some of the vouchers. One of the gentlemen spoke in regards to someone with a disability who had just recently received housing, and then there was a challenge in regards to a door that had been kicked in, and then the landlord did not repair the door, and then the individual was evicted. And so I'd be super interested in regards to how that whole process actually plays out, because if the housing unit is still paid for an entire year, and that landlord can still rent, has been paid for an entire year, and then can turn around and rent that unit again and is double dipping, that is super interesting, right? And so needing to validate that what we heard from that individual, but then to hear from those service providers, I think would be super interesting for this commission to really understand what's happening, right? And then what's happening with dollars that are being budgeted for the work that's happening, because I would then think that that is duplication of services.
I absolutely think that we need to engage with landlords in the conversation. I absolutely think that we need to hear many voices from many sides, and we don't have that at the moment. I would say that, I would go back to the work session that we had, and kind of the collaborative conversation that we have with our supportive housing providers. And I think that's, first of all, a good place to start because we have relationships there. We also have relationships that they are building with local landlords to really take risks on tricky people. And that's what we're asking our landlords to do. So I think just, shoving this, as a conversation through without without consulting with our landlords, just can result in some helps, because we know what this program, what we're talking about that we would gain by it. But I also think we would have some losses that we would need to fully understand too if we do it wrong. I think we just need to engage a larger conversation and involve landlords of many types, but I think our nonprofit housing providers will also have a story in this. Like, evictions happen. We're kind of talking about trying to limit the ones that are outside of the law, which is what getting counsel would do. Having counsel on both sides would accomplish to the best. But we're not trying to say that you don't have to pay your rent anymore. And I think that could easily be understood that that's the conversation, and that's not. Landlord-Tenant Act, landlord-tenant law by the state is still, what would be what both sides of attorneys would be referencing. So we're not upsetting that. I mean, those are the conversations I think that are best had at the state level. If there are changes that may be appropriate to be made there, but within this, we're just talking about having equal representation on both sides, with the assumption that adding representation on one side equals that. That's just another conversation to have too. Rambled a little bit to say, I think we need people in the conversation.
I don't necessarily agree that I'm not even sure what the best way to effectively sort of evaluate and select and engage a landlord or landlords would look like. In my opinion, this is like the evidence behind these programs as they've been enacted elsewhere speaks for itself. And a lot of the evidence and reports indicate that especially those who have done a thorough analysis of a program after it's rolled out in a community have interviewed landlords, lawyers, and landlords and property managers who are by and large in favor of and supportive of the program. It creates more efficiencies. It's more it's more direct and to the point. If there's valid cause for eviction, and eviction is inevitable because 1 + 2 = 3, and that's what Kansas state law says, and there's sort of no refuting that. It's not really about preventing that eviction, and we have never talked about it being something that is going to stop evictions from happening or suggest to tenants that they don't need to pay their rent because they'll just be able to get a lawyer, help them stay in their housing. Like, evictions can and will still happen. They will be granted by the court probably every week, potentially even. Like, that's just a reality. It's the law within Kansas that we're working within. And so there is nothing, in my opinion, that can be reasonably argued as a negative impact for any property owner or landlord. And I should say, not everybody in this room knows this about me, but I should be clear. Like, I am a landlord. My partner and I own a rental property, just one property. So we're an example of mom and pop, landlords, so to speak. And there are, there are no negative consequences for landlords. I'm not saying that there isn't validity to asking for broader feedback, from the community, but this is a conversation that has been publicly talked about repeatedly over time. We've gotten a little bit of public comment from a few people, but not a lot of engagement from landlords who I am well aware are reading this news, are discussing it amongst themselves, and can engage in the conversation if they wish and raise their concerns. I don't know that we need to provide a very direct seat at the table, and I don't even know exactly what that would look like. I would say if the rest of the commission feels strongly that that is like a stakeholder group that we need to think about how to engage, then I would want us to really focus on the landlords that we already are in relationship to, those nonprofit landlords, more mission-driven landlords that we have service agreements with already related to different programming that we do with them, and engage them because they're going to understand the law and know when they have a right to effectively file an eviction and be able to speak to that. But I think that they're going to come at it from a more holistic and fully informed view than others might. So I would just offer that I'm not sure that there's any significant input to be had, because it's not about taking away rights or impeding their rights at all. It's just about providing a right to people who fundamentally don't have as many of them in Kansas state law. And it is, to the point of some public comments that we heard earlier, I think it was Howard in particular who pointed out, like, an eviction it results in a material and devastating loss for people. And so it is different than any other type of civil case where everybody is just expected to be able to hire their own counsel or represent themselves. It's very aggressive legislation. It's very aggressive timeline. It's not easy to understand. And it is a devastating loss and change to that person's life. And the same sort of consequences or penalties, in my opinion, do not exist for landlords on the other end of it. We own property as an investment, as a wealth building measure, as a safety net for ourselves in retirement. And there are risks involved in that. And paying to take care of your property and also paying to hire legal counsel if and when you think you need to is, that's, in my opinion, what your tenant is paying you rent for.
Throw out one piece of information. And like I said, I don't know that it went to all commissioners, so we'll make sure that it does and gets in the record, but of a person saying that they, as a landlord, they don't use the eviction court, they use the small claims court. So, and that's just, is that a piece of the puzzle that we need to talk about and understand? So I don't think it's ever wrong to find more viewpoints.
Are you getting what you need out of this conversation?
Yeah, I think I am. I think we've got some good direction to begin to further flesh out kind of what a program would look like and bring more what I want to be clear on is, there's several steps in the process here before a program or a policy statement is brought forward here. I know I'm still going to have questions of the commission as we put this together.
I hate to ask this, but I think it's important. Do you have a timeline?
I know I can't do the 22nd. That's 2 weeks from today or tomorrow, in essence, from when the agenda would be put together. So I know I don't have that. So I would be reluctant to give you a time frame. I would say we'd probably be able to get something back, within the next 30 to 45 days to sort of get more questions answered.
And if I'm hearing the commission right, I think the direction that we're giving is definitely wanting to have some of these questions that you've laid out answered in terms of being able to talk to all those legal services providers and community partners. And hopefully that helps you staff build some sort of cost analysis of what we think that could look like, at least for initial rollout. And then I think the other thing I'm interested in having some concrete information back from staff about is, what would, I want to talk more about a resolution and code, and what are the distinctions there. And I think, we are being asked as a commission to take seriously the desire from community members to codify this. And so I want to not lose sight of that thread. I don't want to focus solely on it and lose momentum on getting answers to these other questions and really trying to build out how do we start delivering the services to more people. That's where I'm at, and that's what the get that I want right now. But I do want us to hear more about what it would look like to put it in policy and what are the sort of guardrails or considerations around that from staff's perspective. I'd like some more information relayed back to us about that so that so that the commission can further consider what feels like an appropriate way and place to codify this, if that is the desire of the majority of us.
Do that.
Anything else on this item, commissioners? Okay. Move on that closes our regular agenda. We'll move on to appointments. I don't think.
I did circulate one from Commissioner Dorsey, but I don't know if the commission's had time to take a look at it for Board of Zoning Appeals.
Commissioner Dorsey, are you ready to move forward with that?
I don't think there's a rush on that. I don't think
There's no rush.
the position expires for,
December, yeah.
yeah. So we don't need to address that tonight, I don't think.
So Board of Zoning Appeals, I think, did already time out. It's the Board of Codes Appeals that changes over in the winter.
I'll have to take a look and just verify, but they also don't meet unless there is an item. So BZA, so unless, if there's a vacancy, if they're just missing one, they can move forward.
I was very comfortable with the name that was floated by Commissioner Dorsey. If you want to move forward with that.
Ready, go for it.
All right, I nominate Nolan Jones for the open position on the Board of Zoning Appeals. If I got that right.
Yeah.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 And did I have an HCC recommendation on my note to you all? Let me take a look. If not, we can certainly do that next week too as well.
I don't think I'll be ready on that one.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll give you a little more time on it.
I've got a number of recommendations for the non-lawyer person on the judge appointment committee, and I got another one today, so I'd like to defer that one for a while.
Got time on that.
Is that it for appointments? Okay, we'll move on to Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous.
Thanks, commissioners. My memo is attached. We've updated it with a couple more dates. Just want to really remind commissioners that we have a judges luncheon next week, and to get your lunch orders in. And then next week, we do not have a work session on the 8th. That's all I have.
Sarah, were we working on, I know the October 22nd work session time slot was also when they were wanting to do the Veterans Court, specialty court.
Yes. It's just the Veterans Court kickoff.
Kickoff, yeah. And I know several of us would like to be there. Do we know if we're going to have a scheduling conflict? Would they consider not doing it during our regularly scheduled meeting?
I think they've already scheduled it. And from my understanding, having spoke to the court's administrator, for the Veterans Court, she understood that commissioners might not be able to attend. But right now you do not have a scheduled work session, so I can try to keep it clean.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Any miscellaneous items, commissioners? All right. With that, we are adjourned.